Hello, good morning everyone. I hope that you had a really excellent evening, a great sleep, and a fantastic breakfast. Yesterday was a very invigorating day. We heard from Tristan from the Canadian Space Agency, Zscaler, HP, Tricycle, Kyndryl. We also heard from Deloitte and IBM. Today we'll be hearing from Softlanding, Bell Canada, Telus, and Oneweb. And our first presenter of the day is Mat Burke from Softlanding. Matt is a passionate sales and strategy specialist with a 20-year history in the Vancouver technology industry. As Chief Growth Officer, it is Matt's responsibility to ensure that Softlanding's offerings continue to stay tightly aligned to their customers' changing needs. Thank you, Matt.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mat Burke. I am here representing both Softlanding, the company that I've worked for the last 6 years, as well as Microsoft, where I worked for the previous 8 years. And we'll get to why I'm here representing those people. My job is to try and keep your focus and attention, to earn your focus and attention over the next 40 minutes. I think it's 40 minutes, right? Or do I get some extra time because we're starting a little early? What time would you like me to end? 45 minutes-ish. Great. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics and one of Microsoft's favorite topics, which is the post-pandemic, if we can call it a post-pandemic, hybrid work state. So what does it mean to be a knowledge worker and an information worker today? What does it mean to be a frontline worker? And how can technology continue to improve for us how we do our jobs? These are our topics. So I'm assuming most of you don't know my company. We're about 100 people, so we're not that big and prolific, and a bunch of you have come in from out of town. We're going to talk about a topic I was asked to speak about, which is the changes that have happened inside Softlanding as an organization that went from completely in the office to now completely virtual, and what we've learned through that journey. It's a speaking topic that we've done a number of times. Then Microsoft's vision for what this new era of work looks like. I was told this is all education, so the gratuitous sales pitch is 30 seconds. I'll give you lots of notice so you can grab your phones and be distracted. And then any opportunity for discussion and questions that we have. Not 100% sure how long this presentation is going to take because it's a squish of 2 presentations that I've done. So we'll see as we go along. All right. So I have the good fortune of being a third-generation Vancouverite. I do feel very connected to Vancouver, but of course that is just a pale echo of the many generations that the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh have spent gracing the beautiful oceans, lakes, and rivers of the community all around British Columbia. So Stephanie and Warren say hi. Those of you who were here last time, there was a Microsoft presentation by both Stephanie and Warren, 2 eloquent, intelligent people, one of whom crazily went off and had a child and is on maternity leave at the moment, and Warren has taken is off on some holiday and wasn't able to make the appointment, so they did ask me to come and stand in for them. That's me. You can see, that's me. And I worked for Microsoft for about 8 years in a number of functions, in service delivery, in technology strategy, and ultimately in sales, working with the education community in Western Canada, including a number of First Nations education institutions. The Nicola Valley Institute of Technology was a place that we did a lot of work. Now I work for Softlanding, which I'll talk about more. I'll talk about it now. So it's about a 100-person company. All we do is Microsoft consulting and managed services. Been around for about 21 years, and our focus is on things like this: hybrid work, helping people get more use out of their Microsoft technologies, but also data analytics and data center work, moving things off to the cloud, virtual cloud, cloud desktops, virtual VDI in the cloud, those kinds of things. Not here really to talk about any of the other items here, but Microsoft divvies up all of their partners by competency areas, and we have all of the things. We have all of the things, which makes us very happy, and we have the most of those things of anybody based in BC. Okay, that's enough about me and our company. Let's get into some of the content. So obviously there was a pandemic, and all kinds of work that we do, the nature of the work that we do, really meaningfully changed through that pandemic, and now it's changing again as we come out, right? Some organizations are right back into the office. A bunch of our clients continue to make those announcements. Twitter made the announcement, I think in the last 24 hours, that they were going to expect everybody to go back to the office. Other organizations, including my own, have gone in the opposite direction and say, none of you ever have to come to the office. And we're going to figure out what that means for all of us being able to work together. And then lots and lots of organizations and the predominance of local government that we work with are all in this category, or some kind of hybrid, where we're saying, okay, you got to be here Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or you pick the days. But it's got to be at least 2. Or you have to live somewhere that if I tell you on Monday to be here on Tuesday, you have to be here. And some mix like that. Is that a safe assumption that all the organizations you're here representing are somewhere on that spectrum? And for the most part in the hybrid space? Is that actually, could you show me with just a 1, 2, or 3? 1 is you've gone completely remote, you never have to be in the office. 2 is you're entirely in the office, and other than great events like this, you've got to be bum and seat. Or 3, some hybrid. Could you show me? 3, 1, 2. Wow, big mix. Okay, so tons. That's a big mix, actually. That's the full spectrum. So here in Canada, what we know is people really like the idea of being hybrid. They really like it. Poll after poll after poll are saying they love the flexibility. They love the opportunity to fit some life into their workday. They love the opportunity to go and work from, extend their holiday and do a little work from there. And of course, there's a downside to this. And this is something that we really have tried to study, both because we went through this big transition ourselves over the past couple of years, and we have the good fortune of working with a few hundred clients who are all, like you, in some stage of transition and exploration with this. So the kinds of things that we're hearing a lot of are, is this going to work? Can you see that? Yeah? Okay, good. So there's a lot of communication challenge. Because our work is now less visible to each other if we're in the office, there is more reliance on more formal communication. And if there isn't a pickup in formal communication, people wonder what's going on. No human being likes uncertainty, so there is this increase in the need for more management top-down communication, as well as bottom-up polling. That's one thing that we've seen quite a bit. Big technical issues. Mostly we've seen these are fought through, so people who are not in urban areas and need to have their internet upgraded. Are any of you taking advantage of things like Starlink in your communities? Just ordered yours. Very cool. All right. Yeah, so we've got a number of clients who are now taking advantage of things like Starlink, including shipping companies. BC Ferries right now runs data centers on all of their ships, and they have a 3-year plan to retire all of those and replace it with Starlink and similar RF and line of sight laser connectivity topics. The attack surface for security has drastically increased, hasn't it? This is a huge thing. So IT spending on security, the breadth of technology that people are needing to introduce on the security side has really increased. This is one thing that I'm going to talk a little bit more later, so I won't mention it right now. But big issues with employee engagement, depression, loneliness, especially in those early days. Here in Vancouver, there were a lot of people at our company who lived downtown in 1-bedroom apartments. And they were super socially isolated, and at the beginning anyway, frightened to even to go into the elevator. So they were super isolated. And then this lack of a clear delineation between the work and life has led to some employee burnout issues. Then the last one that I don't think we're going to talk about much more, I find this a really fascinating topic. It's well studied that visible work is perceived to be more valuable than invisible work. So if you and I are both doing exactly the same work, but you're in the office and you're being seen, you're more likely to get assigned more interesting work, more likely to be promoted, more likely to get a raise. And the only real fix for that is the introduction of more tracking, more visibility. But then nobody wants to be tracked. It's a really interesting conundrum. Okay, where do I point this that it works? So from our research and the work that we've been doing with ourselves and our clients, these are the 6 big things that we think that every IT group needs to have some kind of strategy around. So starting with over there with number 1, down at the bottom left, is obviously you need to have some kind of plan to give anywhere, anytime access to people. That is a huge spectrum of people who went from, we were talking to a municipality yesterday, and at the beginning of COVID, they were 70% desktop computers sitting under desks. Now they're all laptops, and they bought all these laptops and they sent them all home, and everybody's got a VPN. We have other clients who've gone completely to a cloud-based VDI. And they don't care what device people bring. You can borrow your kids' 5-year-old Chromebook that they had at home. We don't care what it is. We're going to give you access to a virtual desktop running in the cloud, and that's our point of security. And there's kind of this spectrum of both ends of it. Then there's other organizations who, I would say they're taking the ostrich approach, and they know that these devices are now almost always at home. They're getting used for more than just corporate use, right? They're getting used for all this personal use now, but they haven't upped their security of these devices, and that's leading to exposure. Obviously, chat-based video. There's more than just having a video tool for this. There's all of the cultural and procedural elements of it. We certainly have lots of clients where they don't have a video on culture, right? So we sign on, to a meeting with those clients, and everybody's video is off. Or we might be the only, I might be the only one on the call with my video on. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's the ones with everybody's video on. And for sure, the first 10% of every meeting is set aside for personal talk, whatever it is. Nobody's allowed to start the meeting proceedings until the first 10% of the meeting is spent on relationships. And obviously, all of that is dependent on having the tool. Distributed technology infrastructure. Lots of people are finding that their VPNs isn't good enough, so they're moving they're upgrading their VPN technology. They're upgrading their data center network connectivity, or they're shoveling all their infrastructure off to the cloud, where the technology is better. Increasing self-service support. This could be just things like password reset, giving somebody the tools to re-image their own laptop at home. Those kinds of things. There's that KPI-driven topic again. There's all kinds of technology tools that our community can be introducing into our organizations to help with measurement. And then lastly, this security topic that I think you covered a bunch of security things with other presenters this week, so I'm not going to go into it, but this zero trust, assume breach. So we're going to wrap up this section with just the kind of the lessons learned and the experience of what's happened with Softlanding. So previous to COVID, we were a Vancouver organization. We had almost all of our staff driving distance from our downtown Vancouver office. Everybody drove in. You were welcome to work from home if you felt like it, but pretty much everybody was in the office every day. We were bursting at the seams. We were looking for more office space. Today, we can't go back because we have hired, almost all of our hiring is now outside Vancouver. There's people from St. John's to Victoria. As soon as we said you can work from anywhere and you were never going to insist that you come to the office, people started moving out of Vancouver, here in the Lower Mainland to Abbotsford and Chilliwack, or to Vancouver Island, interior of BC, back home to Nova Scotia. They just scattered all over the place, and they're so much happier, and they're more committed to us because they feel like we've done them a solid. The implications are really clear for us. Number one, we've had significant cost savings. We were going to need to upgrade our office. Vancouver real estate is terrible. We spend $30,000 a month on our current real estate, and we were going to have to double it. The thing that I didn't expect is the benefits to labor competitiveness. So we see this for our competitors. So somebody else that we compete in the labor market with, they tell their staff, oh, you all have to come back to the office. Literally the next week, a huge portion of them will come and apply for jobs at our company. It's happened multiple times. So people are voting with their feet, and in this tight labor market, that's a really big deal. It's not all rainbows. There's a bunch of things that we have not figured out yet. The one that I obsess over right now is the lack of human interaction. We flew all these people in to either Toronto or Vancouver in October, and it was amazing. It felt like a family reunion of people who'd never met in person. It was the craziest experience. I was emotional when I went into our office and it was finally full again. It cost us $60,000 to bring everybody together. It was crazy, so we can't keep doing that. So how are we going to do this? We're trying to entice people into the office. We're trying to bring them in with food. I don't know how many of you showed up, made sure you were here for that 8:30 breakfast. It said 8:30 breakfast. I was here for the 8:30 breakfast. So the most people that we can get into our office now is when we pay for lunch. And it's like a major challenge to bring people in, and yet we know that people want human interaction. They're happier if they feel like they know their colleagues. It's this terrible state of affairs of anyway. Keeping teams connected. It used to be these whole teams are connected all just in person here in Vancouver. Now they're all over the place. And then these last two I find interesting, and I don't hear them getting talked about a lot. One is the context switching fatigue. In the old days, you would have to move. I would have to move from meeting room to meeting room, or I might go meet a client, and I'd have to block half an hour ahead of time to go and transition over there. So during my workday, I would have all of this, downtime, or mental downtime, even if I felt like I was rushing. And now, I don't know about you, I'll have like 14 half-hour meetings through the day, just like one-to-one to one-to-one to one. I'm kind of like, I have to take 5 minutes to just breathe and, head off camera for a minute. And you have to ask for it, rather than having it just be part of your regular context switching. Is that anybody else's experience? Yeah. Right. So these are the things that we're trying. We're trying to start every meeting with personal stuff. We've got way more and more active, social committee things that we're trying to do to just really foment human interaction and team connection. We've got more money for things that we're gonna do some crazy stuff. We're gonna try and see who's into pasta. We're gonna send them all pasta makers. Then we're gonna have a pasta chef, have everybody make pasta together. Then 2 weeks later, we're gonna give them all an address and they gotta ship the pasta makers on to the next person. And we're gonna have this like rolling pasta party. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. It might be a huge waste of time, but why not, right? Yeah? Lots of good murmurs about that. We were thinking about doing the same thing with Oculuses. We're gonna buy 5 Oculuses and send them to people 2 weeks at a time with the proviso that you have to play a bunch of games with your other 5 colleagues. Would you do that? You would, okay, great, all right. And just out of curiosity, anybody else trying some really interesting ways to foment interaction and culture online? Yes?
In person, not online, but we went side-by-siding.
Ooh. Side-by-siding with colleagues. Everybody survived?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a successful offsite. Anybody else try something crazy? Okay. So that was the abbreviated, what does Softlanding learn from working with its employees and clients with online learning. Sorry, not with online learning, with hybrid work. Now I'm going to get into the Microsoft stuff. I was asked to demo a bunch of things that I had never demoed before, so I cheated and there's videos in this. I hope you'll find them okay. All right, so Microsoft's vision is that we all need to be ready as organizations for people to be very flexible in how, when, and where they work. that this should not be driven by dogma and corporate policy and the way that we think we should work. There is enough data out there. And Microsoft's got tons and tons of data that they have thrown into these things. They have myriads of white papers if you're into white papers. They've got research topics if you're into research topics. They've got just reams and reams of data and data and data. The data comes from research that they themselves have commissioned, public research from big providers and the big survey people, but also from meaningful data about how people use their technologies. Are any of you familiar with, it's now called Viva Insights, used to be called Workplace Analytics? You heard of that, seen that before? Nobody? So yes, a couple of nodding heads. So how many of you use Microsoft 365 or Office 365 in your organizations? So lots of you. So that thing, that big technical beast, in theory, could know a lot about how people are working in your organization versus another organization. How many people are emailing outside of business hours? How many people are booking personal time in the middle of their day? How many people are taking meetings outside of their business hours and all those things? So this tool, actually we're going to talk about it later, I did leave it in. Anyway, you can get access to some of that data if you want for your own organization. But Microsoft anonymizes a bunch of it and can study it. So we are all in some way in a real life social science research lab about how people are working. And they have before and after data. So I hope I wasn't clicking a bunch of stuff while I was gesticulating. OK, right. So the data shows a couple of really weird things. People there's no consensus. This one is about, right. So lots of people say they want to be at home. Lots of people say they want to be in the office. Lots of people say they're going to get their best focus time in at the office. Lots of people say they're going to get their best focus time in at home. This can't all be true. So because people don't know what we want, the only option we really have is choice. And it sounds like, well, you're 1, 2s, and 3s. There were more 3s than 1s or 2s, so at least some of your organizations have landed on choice. We know, and my company's lived experience is there's a lot of people moving around in the labor market right now. Would you say that at your organizations in the last 6 months, is there more or less labor variability than in the previous 3 years? More? Anybody having less? Is that anybody like nice and stable? Yeah, a couple people. That's good. What we also know is there's a lot of pain in the middle of companies. So down on the employee level, people don't know what they want, or they want a whole bunch of different things. And at the upper management policy level, at the leadership level, there's usually a consensus on something. And that something could be, let's get everybody out of here and save labor costs. And lots of tech companies are doing that. Like Airbnb did that with their however many tens of thousands, 80,000 organizations. And the other end is the Elon Musks are saying, no, opposite direction, let's get everybody into the office. And it's putting middle management into a really, really tough spot, which is creating a bunch of labor friction. It's super interesting. A family member is involved in a lot of the labor negotiations here in BC, and this is coming up in a lot of labor relation conversations. So it's a big deal. Yeah, I think I can skip that. This is super interesting, this data to me. On the right-hand side are real data, right? Not like, again, data not dogma. Real data showing that people are working way more and in a bigger time expanse of their day, yeah? But at the same time, people are hugely, or not hugely, but they're significantly increasing the amount of personal time off that they're squeezing into their workday. And this is one of the things that people are really happy about. One big impact of it is the importance of increasing the amount of asynchronous work time that we have. This is something we're putting a lot of thought into, where right now I've got these 14 synchronous meetings. So I've got to be sitting there at a screen for hours and hours a day. A bunch of those meetings probably don't need to be meetings. They could probably be like a Teams channel where everybody's exchanging the same information on the same day, but not while they're all staring at a video screen. And that kind of asynchronous or unscheduled or ad hoc communication is one of the things that's going to help people take advantage of the overall pattern of people willing to work at a bigger portion of the 16 or 17 hours a day that they're awake in exchange for more flexibility during the 9 to 5. This is something, again, that we think a lot about, social capital nature. You know, all of the social capital that we had in our organization from all being in the office together is now either eroding because people are leaving who were all here, or it never existed because we've hired somebody in rural Saskatchewan and they're never going to be in the office, and the number of people who feel like they have thriving work relationships is down. And we know that from previous research, the likelihood that people will stay in a company correlates very strongly to their answer to questions like, I have a best friend at work. And it's really hard for us as an employer to create environments where these people are going to say they've got a best friend at work. So what do we do about it? Microsoft's vision is that there's some updates that we need to people, places, and process. We're going to talk through those, and I'm not going to show you the full picture of what they would have wished for me to say. I've kind of snipped a few things out that I think would be meaningful for this audience. One is meaningfully changing or enabling with both technology and training and other things how certain people are working. Information workers, I'm assuming everybody here is an information worker given the nature of the audience, but a lot of our stuff was already via a computer. We're the easiest work cohort to send home. We're not manufacturing employees that you can't send home. Municipal workers, like parks and rec and engineering and all those other things. They all needed to work differently. So Microsoft's, we're going to talk a lot about frontline workers and then flexible staff. I don't think there's a lot of flexi staff that work for your organizations. Is that right? Do you have seasonal workers? Not really. Mostly it's these two first buckets, right? Okay, so what's a frontline worker? These are people who don't use a computer as the main part of their jobs. In healthcare, it would be a doctor. Or a nurse. In our space, it could be anybody who's out, who's in a truck servicing a community, pulling fiber, pulling cable, whatever it is. What I find really interesting is this note right here, that these frontline workers were surveyed about the factors that could help them reduce their job stress. And number one was pay me more money. Number two was give me more vacation time. And number three was upgrade the technology that enables me to do my job. Which is pretty wild for people who we just said, by definition, don't use technology to do the main part of their job. What we also see is lots of them are not getting enough support and training. And lots of them don't feel like they've got enough tech. So they're asking for more tech, they know it's going to reduce their job stress, and they're not getting enough training. This sounds like an opportunity for us to step in and do what we do, be helpful. And then for the reason that I couldn't make myself take out any of these slides talking about culture, this is an opportunity for us to help all of these frontline workers also maintain their work culture and happiness and all those things. So now we're going to get into some of the product stuff. We kind of dip in and out of the product stuff. Microsoft's got a vision for Teams that it is going to be the hub as much as possible for all of the things. Certainly the things that it does natively, like allowing us to meet together and have chats and channels for team communication where we can collaborate, we can share documents, we can do all of those things, but also to automate tasks. We write chat bots for people that they can use inside Teams. We worked with a health authority here in BC in the resuscitation rooms. So through Teams, you can ask for help, and it'll go and pull a bunch of available medical professional information and tell you who's available. It's pretty cool, and you can connect it to other things. How many of you are using Teams? So about 70% of you? Great, thank goodness. And I'm so sorry for the other 30% of you. So specifically, most of us I know the data says this, most of us are using Teams on our laptops, the hard client, or via the browser. This is a very short video. These are all the demo videos. There's probably, 6 of them. I think they're all about 1.5 minutes long. And this one is all about empowering frontline workers. We're going to get the audio?
And starts her day.
Let's just do that again. So this is a quick workflow of a frontline worker working in a retail organization whose now whole technology interface could be in one place rather than having to flip around, skip around, or go to a kiosk computer. The idea is this is this person's personal phone. We've loaded only one application onto it. The only corporate data on this personal device is in this app. If the person quit today, we could wipe just that app and all of the corporate data. They can't even copy and paste things out of this data. It's nicely boxed. Here's the workflow.
Sarah is a frontline worker in Fabricam's women's department. When she arrives at work, she picks up a shared device and starts her day in Microsoft Teams. Teams has been configured with all the tools she needs for her role. She can easily chat with colleagues, stay on top of news and company information, keep track of her tasks, and stay up to date on her schedule. She clocks in to start her shift in Teams. She can also see the tasks she's been assigned for the day, including an attachment with instructions for some props that she needs to add to the display. She presses the push-to-talk button to instantly connect with the receiving crew using walkie-talkie and Teams. They locate the items, saving her time and effort. When she completes the display, she creates an approval request for her department manager to confirm that the display was set up correctly. The department manager instantly reviews it and updates the card as approved. Later in the day, Sarah receives a comment card for the fantastic service she provided while helping a customer. She wants to share the positive feedback with the manager on shift, but she's not sure who is working today. She types store manager, and shift-aware tags routes her message to the manager on duty. She takes a picture of the comment card, which is stored in Teams and not locally on the device, so it remains secure without taking up phone storage space. Within moments, the manager on duty sends praise for a job well done. Sarah has a birthday coming up, and she wants to take the day off. She can see her upcoming schedule in shifts and can pick up open shifts that need coverage, swap shifts with a coworker, or request time off. She requests the time off and sends it to her manager for approval. She then clocks out to end her shift.
So what you hopefully picked up there, there's like 6 or 7 different workflows all coming through the one app. This is a frontline worker. We only had to train that frontline worker on one app. It's very discoverable. It feels a lot like swiping around in Instagram, but there's workflow in there. So Teams, from Microsoft's perspective. A lot of this stuff also shows up through Teams. Viva is Microsoft's employee experience program. So you're going to hear a lot more about this from our friends at Microsoft. And really, it's an umbrella of multiple different acquisitions and tools that they've developed that are all about enhancing employee experience. I'm going to talk you through these in like a couple of sentences each, and then I picked out 2 that I think you'd be interested to see more about. Viva Connections is all about an intranet. Everybody's got an intranet or something like that, right? So no, nothing like that? Okay, that's cool. I'd be interested to talk more about how you solve some of the problems that an intranet usually would about corporate communications and whatnot. The idea here is pulling in a corporate intranet into Teams. One more thing that we can be surfacing through Teams. You just have to have your corporate intranet running on SharePoint. If it's not, then you've got to do a little bit of plumbing, and then you can still do it. Viva Insights is taking advantage of that information that we talked about a little while ago. Actually, we're going to do a video about that one. It takes advantage of all the information that you've got in your Microsoft 365 tenant and starts giving people customized advice about, like, hey, why don't you not send that email at 8 p.m. at night and send it to be sent at 8 in the morning? Because every time you do this, your staff all start replying, which means you're incenting people to work at night by sending after-hours email. Why don't you put it for a delayed send, and everyone's going to be happier, which is kind of cool. Viva Learning is an LMS, like a learning management system. Viva Topics is very interesting in local government. It will pull together, with another tool as well, a bunch of records management tools, records management capabilities. It'll start auto-tagging information. Are your organizations required to do records management and have tagged, like do document dispensation and all those things? Yeah. Working on it, is that what you said? Yeah. So this could be interesting. Once you create your file plans, this will actually auto-tag a bunch of documents and then layer on a bunch of protection based on the auto-tagging. So if this is, citizen medical information, you can say this can never leave our organization. No one can copy it, paste it, email it, forward it, even print it. And it doesn't matter if somebody can, put it onto a USB stick. All of those same rules apply. And then Microsoft bought Ally.io. It's now called Viva Goals. It's about KPIs and organizational key objectives. We're not going to do any of that. I'm going to skip this one so that we can just do this one, which I think is really cool. AI in your day.
As organizations adapt to collaboration in a hybrid world, they'll be able to use Viva Insights to make meetings more effective. Viva Insights users will see how consistently they're following meeting best practices, like starting meetings on time and including an agenda. Of course, this information will be private, like all personal insights in Viva. Only the meeting organizer will see their meeting effectiveness data. Users can also create a shared meeting plan so their team can follow the same meeting norms. With only a few clicks within the Viva Insights app, select the meeting practice and team members to share the plan with. Viva Insights will also help users understand how they're spending their own meeting time to evaluate how that matches up with their goals. For example, users will see what proportion of meeting time they spend with customers and other people around the company, as well as within their own team. Soon, managers and team leads will have help staying connected with their teams through intelligent reminders to do things like schedule one-on-one time and respond to unanswered mentions in documents or chats. Insights for managers and team leads can also help set team norms, like designating specific no-meeting days to give people a chance to catch up on focused work. And managers can use the Send Praise feature to recognize the team's accomplishments more easily and add a badge along with a custom message. It's
a great example of the continued introduction of more AI into how people are doing even small tasks. I don't know how many of you have noticed, but in things like even PowerPoint and Word, you're starting to get AI-driven advice on how to improve your documents, how to improve your presentations. In PowerPoint, shortly you'll all see I forget what it's called. It's essentially like a presentation coach. So you can click the button, you can deliver your presentation, and the AI will give you feedback. You talked too fast. You were too wordy. Your slide was too wordy while you were talking over it, or whatever the advice is. It's super interesting. Okay. So back to the places. Really, the whole idea here, I cut out almost all the content because I think in your cases, you probably only need to be thinking about meeting room experiences. So we have an etiquette at our company. There are no hybrid meetings until we fix our room spaces. There are no hybrid meetings. As soon as one person in a meeting is going to be remote, everybody has to go to their desk and turn on their computer. And we know that we should do this because when we used to try hybrid meetings, and we have people around a table like yours, and there'd be a camera on one side of the room, and the people, their faces would be up, they'd miss all the sidebar conversation, they wouldn't feel physically present to the people in the room. The people online were missing things. It was just a total disaster, and it led to the people online feeling like second-class meeting citizens, and they were feeling disengaged. Anybody else echoing that? Yeah, it sucks. So the only way to kind of deal with this is, well, there's two ways to deal with this. One is to completely readapt a meeting room space. which is the space is physically designed to be shared mutual and shared online and in person. And I'm going to show you the video about it. It's my favorite video that on this thing. And then the other one is to go completely online. And in Teams, you'll shortly have an avatar, just like elsewhere. So if you're on calls with anybody at Microsoft and they're on right now and they're on their own internal beta release, they all have avatars, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious. I wouldn't say it's helped me feel more connected to them as I communicate with them. I think quite the opposite. But to solve this problem, it's got to be one of these two things. Anyway, here's Microsoft's vision for and this isn't, sorry, a vision. This is their products and design principles. And we have a bunch of clients who are already doing this. We're just too cheap to have done it yet.
Today's Microsoft Teams rooms bridge the gap between in-person and remote meeting attendees, providing everyone high-quality, inclusive experiences. Going forward, these rooms will deliver more natural and immersive experiences for hybrid work. The focus room will evolve to connect in-person and remote attendees in a more unified experience, with a larger screen where interactions feel more natural as you sit face-to-face across from life-size remote colleagues, a camera placed at eye level to improve eye contact, spatial audio so you hear people's voices from their position on the screen, and to enrich real-time collaboration, meeting chat notes and actions will be at the forefront of all Teams rooms. Larger rooms with more attendees make it challenging for people working remotely to know who is present and who's talking. Teams rooms will deliver a meeting experience where everyone is fully represented and connections feel natural. We have reimagined the meeting room to bring people face-to-face with remote colleagues and unlock more space for people, content, and collaboration. Technology will fade to the background, with premium microphones hidden in the ceiling. Intelligent camera technology will bring in-room participants clearly into view through individual video streams. And spatial audio will help remote participants establish presence with a virtual seat in the room. All so that you have more authentic connections with everyone in the meeting. Our vision for meetings is about leveling the playing field for everyone, where remote and in-person attendees are represented equally and everyone can collaborate without compromise.
I love it. I totally love it. It's going to be expensive though, right? We're talking about full room redesign, new screens. You're going to need new microphones, new tables, new furniture to be able to do that. But that's, I think, what it's going to take. And until then, our company's decided no hybrid meetings, only in person or all online. And anybody have any comments about that? Anybody tried one of these yet? Yes?
I have a question about Microsoft Teams and if Microsoft's thinking of developing like some telephone stuff, because I know Polycom has some devices that are supposed to be integrated with Teams, but like is Microsoft moving more into hardware as well, like for specifically phones?
Question is Microsoft going to move more into VoIP phones? Answer is no. They're going to stay with their partner model with folks like Poly and Yealink and the others. Yeah, they're not going to do that. I'm supposed to be done in just a couple of minutes, so I'm going to skip through some stuff. This was going to be a great showcase of how you can have a very excellent hybrid whiteboarding experience. This was going to be how you can have an interesting phone experience with something called Operator Connect, where, again, those field workers, you can load Teams onto their phone, and it captures their mobile phone, so they can have this hybrid mobile phone and desk phone experience. And from their cell phone, they can be calling out, and they're making an office call. There's lots of really cool things with this. And then, as I've already alluded to, we need to change some of our collaboration processes to match these new tools and new requirements from the people. And a lot of this, I think personally, means we need to take a lot of our communication and collaboration to a more asynchronous state. And a big part of that is using things like shared channels in Teams. So this is like, it's almost like there's an ongoing conversation in a room, and people are going in and out of the room, and they're just continuing the conversation. You just don't have to be there at exactly the same time. This is how we do all of our ideation at our company now. A collection of chats, a collection of documents that we're all collaborating on. And we can be having like a 30-minute working meeting, and everybody's got the document open, everybody's doing it all at the same time. And then we leave, and the dialogue continues. So we don't have to be synchronous together in order to innovate. I think I am going to show this one. This is really cool. Huh. No, looks like I'm skipping past that one. And
Today, Editor helps you write with confidence, correcting grammar, spelling, and making context-relevant suggestions as you type and auto-completing your sentences. But now, empowered by Context IQ, Editor takes it to another level. Let me show you. Instead of having to search for a file you intend to share, Editor with Context IQ recommends the most relevant files directly in your flow. No more switching between apps and then manually copying and pasting links into your email. When using the app mention, it uses logic to recommend the right people, not only saving you from searching, but also from accidentally including the wrong person with a similar name. And when you want to meet with someone, Editor with Context IQ will recognize your intention and leverages the Microsoft Graph to recommend times that you are all available, saving you from switching apps and conducting a tedious calendar search.
yeah, I didn't give you any preamble for that one. Okay, last topic. None of this makes any sense if we can't secure it. I've alluded already a couple of times to the fact that this has hugely increased our attack surface. It's going to increase our attack surface. We need to change our practices. We need to change our tools. Microsoft believes that they are doing a great job in this space. Market participants and industry analysts would agree with them. They've got all those fancy Magic Quadrant and Gartner or Forrester Wave things. We certainly are seeing more and more of our clients standardizing on Microsoft's security platform, not least because everybody's budgets for the year ahead are all uncertain for a bunch of reasons, and it is cheaper to do a platform rather than best of breed. And that's all I was going to say about security, as I think you've probably heard lots about security already. If you want to learn more about all of that data and what it might mean for your organizations, here's 2 things to go and check out. Great source of data. I love this stuff. I love what the data's telling us. And here's 2 things. And then here's your warning. The gratuitous sales pitch is coming. So there's my email address. We work with lots of government organizations, not that many band offices, but a couple. Seabird Island is the one that we work with the most, which is here in BC. And we help with any Microsoft-related technology, consulting, and managed service. And certainly the kinds of things in government that we're doing in similar organizations to yours is moving things off to the cloud, helping with endpoint management, helping with security, helping with moving things to the cloud with Azure. And that's it. And I think I nailed that for 5 minutes of questions, right? Did I get 5 minutes of questions? Yes!
Hey, thanks. Great presentation, by the way. Will Gray, Prince Albert Grand Council. We are a heavily integrated team shop, continuing to move more in every day. Enterprise voice even. One of the issues that we've realized, we've got about, I think, half a dozen Teams rooms out there now, provided by Yalink or Yaylink, depending on how you say it. And it's been fantastic. We've had a great experience. The only thing I had question on was, do you know if Microsoft has any plans to further integrate with things like WebEx and Zoom that our partners are using instead of Teams? Because we're, like our Teams room devices, you can join a meeting, but we found it's often glitchy, or the government of Saskatchewan uses WebEx entirely, And one day I'm having to run around and find a USB keyboard to plug into our device because now I've got a CAPTCHA showing up on our device and there's no way to enter that. So we're finding as the technology continues to evolve on all levels from all the providers, the less we can use the Teams room devices and join a Zoom meeting or a WebEx meeting, because it just keeps getting more complicated. And we went from a single push button for our staff to join a meeting when they walk into a room to now our IT department's constantly having to go over to help people join meetings. And then, to my knowledge, from my desktop, there's no way for me to join a Zoom meeting inside of Teams. I have to open the Zoom application, which means it's another thing that we have to support. So just a couple little comments there, or questions, I guess, about Teams interconnecting with other platforms.
Yeah. So I'm not the right person to get into a whole bunch of details about the Teams product roadmap, but if you and I can exchange details, then I can go and dig that up. I know that it's one of those things where the marketing material says that you can launch a WebEx within Teams. And the more technically complex your use case is, then the more likely you are to run into problems with that. So, the more variety of Yealink, Yalink materials, then the more likely it is you're going to end up running into something that hasn't been fully ironed out. So yeah, sorry I can't give you a direct answer, but yeah, I will. I'll get you an answer. Great. Stunned into silence. Okay, I'm going to turn off my microphone. Thank you so much for your attention.
So yesterday, I thought that I wanted to be Nova Networks when I grew up, and now I want to be Softlanding. So I have a really small business. I only have 2 people on my team, so I might be the smallest company of them all. But we had a presentation from Matt of Softlanding. He's been with Softlanding for 6 years. Prior to that, he was with Microsoft for 8 years. His presentation was called Build Your Digital Future Securely, and we learned that Stephanie and Warren from Microsoft presented to NIITA in 2019. Matt talked about the hybrid work challenges, about management and communication, how communication is key. Security risks were also a challenge, employee engagement, technical issues, tracking performance, and also employee burnout. Talked about the strategy of hybrid work, how it's structured around 6 pillars: self-service support, being KPI driven, zero trust, assume breach, any device, anytime, anywhere, looking at chat video-based communication and distributed technology infrastructure. The benefits of being fully remote gave their company competitiveness of labor, cost savings, and choice for their employees to go to the office or not. Some of the challenges and solutions provided talked about human interaction and team connection, content switching, and also about how it's less likely for us to have brain break times and limited downtime. We've seen an increase of personal time off, but we have more people working after hours and on weekends. So I wanted to mention that one of the innovative platforms that I've tried out is called Gather. Gather is kind of like a little metaverse, and you have a little avatar. It kind of reminds me of Zelda. It's a video and audio chat platform, and that's one way that we had people come together virtually. I also appreciated just that you talked about Viva a little bit. Teams and Viva Connections, Insights, Learning, Topics, and Ally AO. Teams is built on SharePoint, and I was nervous because I had experience with SharePoint since 2007, but a lot of the back end and the whole premise of SharePoint is that it builds websites using lists and libraries. And so Teams is sort of a platform that's been built on top of that. And it made me really think a lot about shadow IT services, where we're looking at many different platforms and how we have information siloed in platforms like Dropbox or Zoom, and then you might have employees out there with admin rights to those platforms, and then you don't have any data management in your network because how are you supposed to back up all those services? So I appreciate that Microsoft has really taken an integrated approach, looking at a full suite of platforms. So I'm also trying to get some of my clients off of Zoom and onto Microsoft 365. And I want to remind people that there are many different licensing models within Microsoft right now. There's like business, there's enterprise, there's education, there's frontline, there's many, many different solutions for you. And the creme de la creme, in my mind, is that E5 license, just where the security and some of the phishing capabilities and advanced threat protection. I've mostly been focused on Intune, Autopilot, and Defender, looking at security, but in the future I'll be looking at NVivo. So thank you so much for your presentation. Up next, we have Bell Canada, who will be talking to us about cybersecurity. We have Ed Rebane, who is the security practice for Bell in the West. He is certified as a CISP, CISSP, CISM, and CSSA. In addition to holding a bachelor's and master's degree in engineering physics from McMaster University, Ed is also a member of Pacific Fraud Association. His 20-plus years of security experience include product management, architecture, corporate security, and customer-facing security services for both business IT and OT, industrial control systems, domains. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's quite an introduction. Happy to be here. So we're both from Bell. I'm Ed, and this is Dion, and we're going to provide you with some context and perspective. And the reason we're doing this is because, next page, where's the clicker? There it is, sorry, okay. All right, let me see here. There. Because how do you know, with everything that's going on, that you're doing the right thing at the right time, the right way? You know, the worst thing to do is to spend money and do something and then 2 weeks later get breached. That's going to make everybody look bad. So that's why context and perspective is important. We call that going wide, going deep. So I'm going to talk about going wide, and Dion's going to be talking about going deep. So Dion's from our security testing practice, and he'll give an example of a specific going deep considerations. And I'm going to talk about going wide. You know, I presented at a board once, and one of the board members said, ask the CISO, how do you know that the money I'm giving you is being put to good use and that we're protected? And the worst thing the guy could have said was that I got this product in, I guess this, you know, all kinds of products in, and we're good. That's absolutely the worst thing to do. The best thing to do and the right thing to do is to say, I know what my threats are, I know what my risks are, I've done an assessment, I have a plan based on a framework, and I know how to get from here to there. Because when you deal with security, it's getting more complex, and the only way you deal with complexity is by having a plan. Now, if you were to get breached, they'll call in an auditor, and an auditor will look for not what controls you have in place, they'll look for that too, but they'll look to see if you got a plan. And if you don't have a plan, then you're not doing the right thing. So I always ask, does a customer have a plan? And the reason I'm doing that is there's a lot of stuff you have to deal with. I put this up just to show how many things you could possibly deal with, and the question is, where do I start? Well, one thing you need is you need to be able to align towards a framework, and a NIST framework is a good framework. It covers all the different actions. You need to be able to identify what your assets are. You need to protect them. You need to be able to have eyes on glass, see what's going on. If something were to happen, you have to respond. You have to be able to recover. And you don't just look at it at the network layer. You have to look at it at all of your assets. So all of your assets, all that capability. And you can see on the left, those are the things that happen before a breach, and then during a breach is, detect, respond, and recover, of course, and then you learn from that. So a good framework, NIST is a good framework to align with, and most compliance things look for that framework and they see how well you're doing. This one just shows where people typically spend budget. The dark blue, and no surprise, protect the network. And detect the network, intrusion detection system, stuff like that. SIMs. Even when you're protecting your network or some of the assets, you have different perspectives over there too. You have to be able to see what's going on, leaving the organization, coming in. But you also want to see east-west traffic, what's moving around laterally that you cannot detect. Another question I had from one of the board members, this was at the same meeting, good question, smart guys actually, and ladies, was that how do I know that I'm not breached already? Now, how do you answer that? You have to be able to say that, well, I've looked for east-west traffic by doing specific things, not just that I have a monitoring service in place and people are looking for log management and stuff like that, but I'm specifically looking for anomalous activity and I'm looking for north-south traffic. I have eyes on glass on all this kind of stuff. And that's how you would answer something like that. Also, you would call in somebody like Dion, who would be doing some security testing, just like a real bad guy, to see if there's any evident exposures that indicate that you're probably breached. You just don't know what's going on. And so that's one thing. I put this up because I wanted to show you that the way things evolved is, in the old days, people put some technology in place. And they feel that the technology is going to take care of things. Intrusion detections, antivirus, web filtering, all that kind of stuff. But they have no operational visibility because the technology is in, it's going to take care of it. So that's not good. Later on, they evolved as they're increasing in their maturity, and they're looking at some of their assets, but they haven't identified all their assets and what's critical to the business. Just looking at some things and only looking at those assets from different perspectives some of the time. And if something were to happen, then they would react. That's not good either, but you can see you're starting to reduce the risk. Then what you want to do is you want to be able to look at all your critical assets. You need to be able to detect what's going on, defend what's going on against all those different layers that I showed you on the NIST diagram, and you need to have an incident response plan prepared. Now, I don't know if you have cyber insurance, but cyber insurance guys will ask usually if you have an incident response plan. And then they'll also probably sell you a retainer for incident response retainer. And if they're a good cyber insurance company, they're going to want to understand how well you're managing security to reduce their risk in terms of what they need to pay out. If they're a bad cyber insurance company, they're not going to ask you much questions. So I'd be very leery about that. So that's kind of how it goes all the way down to the bottom, where you're actually defending your critical assets, you know what they are, you're always watching, you're applying threat intelligence, and you're actively defending using indicators of compromise that you acquired through other mechanisms, feeding them back into your controls. There's a loop back over there. And that's what you do as you're starting to enhance your security posture. This is a pretty busy diagram, but all it really is, it's a gap assessment. You need to understand your current state, what are your assets, what is your attack surface. If you have any OT, which is the framework that IoT or devices or applications sit on, building automation systems, that's for an example. Municipalities or water treatment plants, these are all OT things. That used to be analog, now it's digitized, people are pulling information from it, it's becoming your attack surface. So you need to have an understanding of your total attack surface, critical assets, and then you want to be able to understand, where do I need to go to? What's my target state? And your target state is depending on what your business is, what you want to achieve in the next year or two, and what is the risk level I need to be at to support that business. So that, in addition to a framework, would help you identify your target state. Now you got your current state, target state. Also, when you do current state, it's a consulting engagement. But we also look at what information is available that we can look at. We also run tools to do a mapping and a discovery of your assets, and you also do security testing. All those things to give you a good idea of your current state and your current risks. And you tell anybody that, I now know what my risks are because I've done these things, they're going to feel comfortable. And when you ask for budget, they're going to feel comfortable too, because it goes somewhere. It goes into a plan that gets you from here to here. And it's a well thought out approach. So what I'm providing you now is the going wide view, and it's all about context. And this is a good thing to remember. You always need to assess or plan. You need to build, operate, and govern. Those are the 4 blocks. But there's so many things or verticals in each one of those. When you're assessing, that means know your assets, know what your risks are, have you mapped it out. The planning side, I'm moving towards a target architecture. I got short, medium term, long term goals. You know, one of the things I always ask when I start with a customer is, do you have a plan? Is your plan based on a strategy? There's different plans based on different strategies too. If you think you're targeted, the way you strategize to protect is different than if you think you're not targeted and you just have opportunistic people coming after you, like ransomware. You know, I saw in October in the paper, ransomware, this guy from Gatineau in Quebec, you probably saw that, sentenced, he was extradited to the US and sentenced to 20 years in prison. But you know, he made $21 million in ransomware. And they want him to pay that back, as if he's going to pay that back. But the thing that struck me about that is $21 million of ransomware. I've never seen that in the paper where people talk about all these people paying ransomware money out, up to $21 million. You hardly ever see that. You see the big ones. But there is the ransomware stuff going around, easy pickings, and that's something that you need to go vertical on. Am I protected against stuff like that? And that's not just one of them, it's just some of them. Then building, when you build something, you have to build it within an architecture or a context. So you need an architecture, then you know where everything fits in. Operations, eyes on glass, north, south, and east-west kind of traffic going on, ability to respond, and governance, all the things you need to be compliant with. So now I'm going to hand it over to Dion, otherwise I probably took up half of this time. But you know, he's going to talk about security testing. Even that is a very muddy thing. And I'll interject if there's a few other thoughts that come into my mind. But security testing, where does it fit? Fits under planning, to see what are my assets, to do some security testing. Operational, it's an operational activity. Governance, compliance, for example, PCI, you have to do security testing. So it fits in a lot of these areas. Over to you, Dion.
Thanks, Ed. Sorry, I'll reintroduce myself just really quickly here. Hi, I'm Dion. I'm part of the Bell Security Testing and Incident Response team. I'm usually purely a technical resource, so forgive me if I'm a little bit nervous today. I got my notes out and everything. At Bell, what the security testing and incident response team does is that we test external clients, and that's part of that building and planning, that preventative step of doing security testing for clients before they're breached, right? It's a lot cheaper to check for vulnerabilities beforehand than it is to pay out people who get in ransomware, you know, $21 million, all that. So basically, our goal is to provide a holistic approach to identifying compromise. Here are just a few of the services that we offer. And what I mean by holistic approach is that we are trying to, rather than identify individual compromises, we're looking at your attack surface or your infrastructure as a whole and looking to identify what your security posture is in general. So a lot of that can often be, for example, pivoting from a network penetration test into a cloud or a web mobile into a network, for example. This happens a lot because we're able to track and identify vulnerabilities at multiple points throughout an organization, and then leverage these multiple compromises and able to give you a better idea of what your risk is in general. I'll talk a little bit more about the network and give a few more examples about that. So just focusing in on the network penetration test side. Network penetration tests are generally security tests within a specific network. That can be like your external facing infrastructure, so web servers, FTP servers, things like that that are exposed to the public internet. That's what we would consider your WAN side. And then, or we can do internal testing, which is, for example, an assumed breach, or a just somebody who's plugged their laptop into your network, walked into your office building, plugged into your network. A lot of these times, these tests will start as an external, right? We'll start testing the external. We'll realize that there was a compromise, some way to pivot into your internal network. Then all of a sudden it becomes an internal network penetration test. From the internals, a lot of the times we're able to find our way into your cloud. And then it turns into a cloud penetration test. And that's what I mean by a holistic approach to security testing, is that we're not looking at specific individual vulnerabilities and compromises. We're looking at what your network is as a whole, and then working our way as deep into your organization as possible. So you know what your risk is and what is possibly possible to compromise. Yeah, anything to add?
You know, I wanted to add to this. When it comes to testing, everybody does testing. Even people that aren't testers, they do testing. They download a tool, they point and click, spits out a report, change some of the logos, and ask for a couple $1,000. You know, that's very bad because it's not the real world. And the people that are attacking you, they're very skilled. They use a combination of tools. They got a lot of time. They're not just doing point and click. But what I've seen out there is when customers ask for, give me a quote for some security testing, I need to make it clear to them that there's a big difference. There's a difference between manual testing and automated scanning or point and click, but they'll call that testing too.
So I can add to that is a lot of the times what we'll see is that a lot of organizations will be looking to just meet the compliance standards. And that's a very risky approach to take. If you're just meeting the compliance standards, you can hire someone to do basically just a quick scan and get a check mark on your compliance, and you're not really protected at that point. Some clients will receive the reports from previous places that they've done that, where they've done a VA scan or just a quick vulnerability assessment and seeing just to get that check mark for the compliance, but then we're later breached and have come to us and said, hey, look, we have gotten tested in the past, I don't know what happened, now we're breached, and then we've come in the past. I will say our team is very good at working with the clients. We will walk you through the steps and also offer potential remediations. And there are a lot of other teams out there too that do do security testing. We do recommend cycling your security testing teams possibly every 3 years, 1 to 3 years. That way that you get a wide variety of different teams working on problems, because each team has strengths and weaknesses. I think our team is quite advanced because we have a good diversity of experience across the board. We have a lot of people who compete in CTFs, identified a bunch of 0 days and along those lines. But still having a wide variety of teams, again, is very important to your overall security and your planning.
You know, when we do security testing, Dion talked about network testing, but there's all these different types. Each one uses different tools, different expertise, and it's not all the same. Like application security testing. When we test an application, we do it always manually. Of course, there's tools that we use, but that's just to see what kind of high-level vulnerabilities or exposures are there. Then we figure out a strategy, how we can break in and all kind of stuff, just like the bad guys would. So to do an application test, to determine what it'll cost, you need to know what kind of application am I testing. Is it made out of 10,000 lines of code? Or is it a static website with maybe 100 lines of code? You know, so what we do is we try to understand the target of evaluation. We ask some questions. How many forms? You know, how many administrator privilege kind of levels are we looking at? That kind of stuff. And then we can determine how long it'll take to test it. What I've seen some customers have quotes for application testing where they say it's manual testing, but it's $5,000 for any kind of application. And how could that be, $5,000? So if you got a 100,000 line app and you got one for 100 lines of code, it's going to cost $5,000 for each one. How could that be? And what they're doing is the person providing that is running a scanner, web app security tester, and then maybe picking one or two things to do a manual test. And they're saying that's a manual application test. False sense of security, but right away red flag goes up, one price for all, red flag. That's how they fool you. That's how they trick you. But so if you want to really be protected, you need to do it the right way. That's why we call this whole presentation context, going wide and deep, and perspective.
Yeah, and speaking of presentation services we offer, network, cloud, and web and mobile tend to be our most popular. People are always concerned about the web and mobile because that is primarily the most external-facing infrastructure they have. But I will say that a lot of people don't take the time to maybe, we don't have it up here, but to do IoT or physical intrusion testing, which is a lot of fun on my end, if anyone wants to do it, because then I get to come into your office and see how far I can get. But focusing on the networks it is important because that tends to be where most of your risk factors are, but people don't often take into account physical intrusion or Wi-Fi, for example. You don't know if somebody's connected to your internal network from, for example, the parking lot, parked in their car, right? If your Wi-Fi is spanned out a little too far, they might be able to access internal infrastructure that way. So again, this comes back into that idea of a holistic approach of your network, where our aim is to really understand your organization, your product, as Ed was saying, your applications sometimes, and identify the risks, identify the compromises, and then leverage compromises across multiple different systems. And that's often how we're able to pivot very easily into other parts of your organization.
You know, so we have 800 security people. I bet you didn't know that. It's not going to be, if you do a Google search, you're not going to find that, but we do. And most of our business is word of mouth. But we like to help everybody because we're in this war together. We're fighting with you as part of your team. So what we do is, if you have a specific need, we'll address that, but we'll also put it into context so you understand. Doesn't make sense. Maybe you shouldn't be doing that right now. Maybe you should be doing it a bit later. Or we can do it. You want security testing? Look at all the different types of tests you can do, different starting points you can do. You know, we'll provide you with that context. So that's how we approach things. And
yeah, a great example of that is actually our purple team exercises, for example. If you, again, as Ed was saying, it's not a great idea to just deploy a tool and expect it to do everything for you. If you are deploying something like a SIEM or a new SOC software, the purple team is a great way for us to work with your internal security teams. We can perform attacks against your network or against a certain infrastructure, and then see how your new product performs. And that includes creating, for example, identification vectors and seeing what the response is like for that specific tool. If you would like to test your security teams, then we go red team, for example, whereas we don't necessarily inform your internal security teams. We usually only have a single higher up point of contact. And we see if you're able to identify that you're even being attacked. Right? If you're not able to identify you're being attacked, it's not likely that you'll be able to identify that you've been breached later on down the line. And attackers tend to live on the LAN, for example, and stay within your network for an extended amount of time, which is very potentially risky. So again, it's part of that working with the security teams rather than just providing a report and being hands-off and saying, we're done.
You know, not to brag, but our testing guys, they win competitions, North American competitions like NorthSec several years in a row, things such as that. And I don't know if anybody else can, say they do that on a regular basis, but we do. And in fact, we had one type of service which was called bounty-based testing, where we'll test to see if we can get into and become like an admin privilege user. And if we can, you don't have to pay us anything. That's how confident they are, that they can get in. And if they do, then you have to pay us something for the report and everything. So I think that's still available. It's part of the portfolio of security testing, but remember, you got to do it the right way. Otherwise, what's the point of testing?
Yeah.
Any questions?
Any questions? I think we have some time for questions.
Yeah. No questions. Who has compliance requirements? Credit cards, privacy, you know, like all this kind of stuff. If you can get into a system, privacy is going to be impacted. I know for sure we've done tests where we've been able to get in, and all the stuff that you can see from a personal perspective is pretty scary. And now, if there is a privacy breach, you have to make that known. It's a federal law now. It never used to, but now you have to say that. Actually, the pharmacist that I got a flu shot the other week, they sent me a note saying that they've been breached and personal information might have leaked. I'll let you know. But the way they described it, it was a ransomware attack. You know? So if you have personal information, you know, sensitive information, financial information, it's a highly recommended thing to do. But you need to do it the right way. Context and perspective. That's what it's all about. Thanks. How much time do we got left?
15 minutes.
We have 15 minutes left? Oh, great. Then we can talk about a lot more of this stuff. So security testing. What kind of testing requests do you usually get most often? I mean,
Yeah, so primarily we get a web application and network penetration test requests. And again, I was mentioning before, people are mostly concerned about the external networks. And I think that's a good way to look at it, but there needs to be an understanding that your internal network is not necessarily secure either. So internal Wi-Fi and physical intrusions are usually what I also recommend. Just because you never know if somebody could walk into your office and how easy it is to get into people's office a lot of times. You walk in with a bell shirt, nobody really asks questions if you're supposed to be there or not. Can I see your server room? I need to fix something with the internet. Or for example, how many of you work in an office building? Right? And you use a fob, I assume, or a key card somehow to get into that. And that's often part of people's security plans is to use a key card or a fob to prevent people from going up and down the elevator. I have actually in my pocket this key. This is called an FEO1K1 key. It's often what firefighters use to take over control of elevators, for example. So if you're using your fob system as your only point of control to control your elevators going up and down, this is a pretty standardized key in North America. Anyone can just use that elevator. I can take full control of the elevator and take it to whatever floor I want, right? I've seen cases where the elevators will lead directly into the server rooms, and they all have a FEO1 slot as well. And so it can be a part of your security plan, but it can't be what you rely on solely, right? I think really understanding what your internal network is and how it's functioning. A lot of the times we run into, for example, misconfigurations of people have an impression of how their network is set up because that's the way that their product was set up, potentially by a third party. It's very often that we're able to breach because of a server or an application that was set up by a third party, that the internal IT team doesn't necessarily have a full understanding of the way it was set up. They were just told, oh, open this port, oh, add this server to your internal network. And then we're able to breach the third party infrastructure that's sitting within your network or sitting on the edge of your network, for example. So those are key things that you really want to be making sure that you're not only testing your internally developed applications or infrastructure, but also external products that you've implemented. Even SIEM or SOC applications can have security risks and often are our biggest targets because they're pulling in so much information from other infrastructure that being able to breach a SIEM or a SOC application or device, we're able to gain a lot more information that way than from anything else.
Yeah, like also, so whenever I hear the word application development, Do you have an application development team? Do you use third party to do that? Right away, it's kind of an area. Have you ever tested one of those applications? That's something that you should do. Now, we have some customers where they have an application development team, and they use tools to make sure they've done it right. Static code analysis, dynamic code analysis tools, and they're doing it right, trying to build it as securely as possible. But before they release any change or new application, they get our team to test it, because it's a different set of skills. So we're actually part of their team. They give us their annual schedule. We talk with them every month to see what applications are being changed and come out, and then we line up our testing, so we're part of their team. That particular customer had a lot of personal information, so they were very careful about application security. And that's one of the easiest ways to break in, is through an application security. There was another example in manual and automated testing. So this customer, we were able to get in through their application. We ran tools. We did manual testing, but not until we actually found out that the code wasn't protected on the web app properly because of the way it was encrypted. We were able to download the code, go through the code, find a way to get in, and we got into the system. So a tool's not going to do that. A bad guy will do that. So that's another example, real example of why manual testing is important if you have something that's pretty sensitive.
And so to build on that, that example of working with the client is that because a lot of our clients we work with for multiple years, again, I was talking before about cycling, but cycling within 1 to 3 year period, because we've worked with them so often, we see the systems over and over again, and we're able to test and identify vulnerabilities based on similar systems or similar ways that people build things, because a lot of the time it'll be the same development team across the board, and they'll make not mistakes but similar misconfigurations with certain portions of the application or the infrastructure. And so that really gives the client the ability to check the work, especially if the managers are potentially not as technical and aren't sure, or if there are, for example, legacy components that are left behind. We have seen that quite often where applications grow over years and years and years, and there are legacy components that are left behind from previous features that have been removed. And they kind of get lost in the background, and we're able to, by working with the team, looking through the documentation and as well as looking at previous reports and so test legacy portions of depreciated parts of applications, which is often a way that we're able to bypass a lot of securities that way.
Exactly. So, we'd love to speak with you guys to see where you might possibly be at. At a minimum, have a plan. Understand what your risks are. And maybe you don't have to do anything, but you probably do, because everything keeps changing and stuff like that. But at least you got a plan. So if you don't have one, sometimes people say, I got a plan, and it's because I'm going to put this suite of security controls in with this partner. That's my plan. That's not the correct plan. That might be correct for a specific architecture that is based on a plan, but you don't start with that. That's not your plan. So, and then there's timing too. Like when do you put things in place, and when do you address specific things with regard to security? You don't have to do things sequentially. You don't have to have your plan first before you do this, that. There are other things you can do that we already know you should do. It's like washing your hands. You got to wash your hands with soap all the time, but it's not my total medical strategy, But you got to do that. So you got to manage remote access. How are you going to do that? Another thing people think about is they think, well, because I'm putting everything into the cloud, I don't have to worry about security. It's their infrastructure. I'm protected. I'm good. I see that all the time. But you do. All it is a place where you have infrastructure, or virtual infrastructure that you tap into, but your assets and things that are there, you're responsible for the security of that. So we do security testing of assets in the cloud, different cloud platforms.
So,
That's another example.
yeah, so something that we see and that's quite often in cloud security is a lack of proper segregation. A lot of people put things up in the cloud or they have things that automatically scale in the cloud, but they don't really take into account that it is somewhat like, depending on your configuration, and this is primarily people who are early adopters to cloud, often see just a flat layer 2 network up there, right? They think, oh, it's cloud, it's okay, I don't need to deal with the networking or the cloud networking at all. But then there's no segregation between your devices. And we have had instances where we've been able to access one piece of cloud infrastructure and leverage that to move around different, for example, if it's a vendor, different clients' infrastructure, because all their client infrastructure is just sitting on the same layer 2 network, and we're able to pivot from within. And it's part of this, it's somewhat a misconfiguration sometimes, and somewhat just a lack of understanding of new products, and really wanting to be an early adopter, which is great, and cloud is a great way to go, but just making sure that it's part of your testing plan, it's part of your risk understanding, and understanding what your security posture is, not just of your local network, but your cloud network and your IoT devices and your physical office as well. That's all part of your security posture. And that's, again, why we were talking about that holistic approach to security, is trying to encompass security as a whole rather than just individual components of it.
Exactly. So, if you're trying to build a business case to enhance your security posture, one thing that you might want to consider is to do some testing. And you can do some minimal testing. And even with that, it's possible that you could raise some eyebrows and you can get support to improve your security posture. So if something were to happen and personal information were to leak or something like that, your reputation and trust is going to be killed or dropped. And if you lose your trust, it's not easy to gain that again. If I find a company, it's on the news, they've been breached, personal information, we don't know how much, but some has been leaked. I mean, I'm not going to really trust or even want to work or use that stuff anymore. And trust is what drives your business. If it's all about trust. When you look at trust, it's all about flexibility, history, track record, how you manage privacy, how you manage security. All those things are elements to build trust. And that's key to anybody's business. Actually, trust management is a discipline, just like security is a discipline. So there's actually mapping and things you can do to determine what level of trust you want to be at and how you can achieve to get to that spot. Another loosely heard term, just like luxury. When you Google luxury, you get every kinds of stuff coming up. It's not really luxury. When you Google trust, everybody's trusted. When you Google security testing, everybody does security testing. You really need to be able to qualify and ask the right questions. When you go talk with a security vendor or partner, the very first engagement will let you know whether they know what they're talking about or not. I wish we could be with you when you're talking to another security vendor so we can do some sparring and ask appropriate questions to basically let you know whether this guy know what he's talking about or not. Because it's now nobody's fault, but often people, they just don't know what they're talking about. We love to spar on the security side. We spar with each other too. And when they do security tests, then we also do a presentation that we can give to management. And during that, I spar with them to ask them, what about this? You found only 2 medium vulnerabilities. Well, but does that mean that you can't combine the two? And it'll be actually a more important vulnerability? We spar and we qualify each other. But thanks, everybody. We can talk forever about security. And that's just one vertical, security testing. And the context is broad. So remember, wide and deep, plan, build, and then plan, build, operate, and govern. That's what you got to remember. Put things simply. Thanks for your time. Thank you, Dion.
Thank you very much, Ed and Dion, for your presentation about cybersecurity. I was definitely hoping that you could speak to us, maybe on the break, a little bit more about your security certifications, and even just talking about what security best practices are. Because cybersecurity, as we saw, the number of threats has increased since 2020 by like 85% or something. A lot. So it's not a matter of if anymore, it's a matter of when. One thing that I really appreciated from your presentation was the framework matrix. It gives us all a good starting point to think about what are we actually doing with security. We're looking at devices, applications, network, data, and users. And I heard a statistic that 90% of all threats come from your end user clicking that link in their email. Your users are your number one threat. Then across the top, you talked about actions that you have to take. So looking at identity, protection, detection, response, and how are you going to recover from that attack? How do you know if you're doing the right thing at the right time, in the right way? You said, I know my threats and strategy. I have a plan to move from point A to point B. Really determine your framework and an incidents plan. I've heard a lot about cyber security insurance. This is a notion that I didn't really take into consideration before I came to this conference. Talking about security mapping and really knowing your risks. I had a side conversation with Tim from IBM the other evening, and one question that he put forward, and that's where that meme came from, like, I don't think about cybersecurity until it's too late. You know, people are usually not, organizations are not ready to invest the money into cybersecurity until after they've already been breached and they have that real world experience of, oh no, we actually need to put more into our budget. So Tim said, what is the cost of a breach? Do you know the cost of a breach to your organization? What is the cost per hour or per day of your organization being offline? It's an easy way to get upper management and people on board with spending more money on cybersecurity, is just to know, okay, here's the cost per hour or per day for our company being offline, and that's the cost of us doing nothing versus the cost of us being proactive in our approaches. What is your attack surface? Looking at manual versus automatic testing, compliance standards versus quick vulnerability assessments and security testing, looking at application security testing and how many people have a false sense of security. And it's important that we do security testing the right way instead of a surface level. We learned that at Bell, they have over 800 security people, and all across the north, we only have one ISP, Northwest Tel, who's a subsidiary of Bell Canada. And in my mind, security people are almost like white hat hackers that you pay to come in to avoid the bad guys coming to get you. So thank you for your presentation on security testing and thinking about compliance requirements of your organization. Simple things you can do are like making sure that using multi-factor authentication and using a password manager is really important. Strong passwords, resetting passwords, making sure that people don't have the same password. So at this point, we're going to have a short break, and then we'll be reconvening at 10:45 for a presentation from Kathryn from Telus. Thank you. And a reminder, please stay until after lunch, because at the close of day is after lunch, we'll be doing are closing, and we'll have Coastal Wolfpack coming to do a cultural presentation, and we'll also be doing the draw for the $200 gift cards and the iPad. So thank you, everyone. Have a good break. So without further ado, we have Oneweb. Martin Marshall is with us, and Oneweb will be presenting about connecting the unconnected, the impact of broadband access for remote Indigenous communities. I've been following low Earth orbit for probably 10 years. If someone gave me $1 billion to implement it, I could have been the Elon Musk of the North, or maybe the Martin Marshall of the North. Oneweb signed a memorandum of understanding last year with Northwestel. Northwestel is the sole ISP provider for Nunavut, NWT, and Yukon. We don't have anyone else there. They're a subsidiary of Bell. The impacts of low Earth orbit, and I heard people talking during the space agency just about the latency, and I'm like, science. How are we supposed to travel faster than the speed of light? And so it was really smart for low Earth orbit to bring those satellites closer to us instead of like 30,000 kilometers up in the air. I really believed that Oneweb was going to make it to me before some of the competition. And I would love to be a pilot community. I pitched the same thing to your competitors about, taking on my community that's essentially a land island. I would love to see a pilot project. I'm literally next door to Alaska. I have dual citizenship as a Tlingit person. And my family migrated inland from Juneau, Alaska, several centuries ago. Without further ado, Martin is a senior sales engineer for Oneweb based in Anchorage, Alaska. He has spent the last 25 years in the telecommunications industry, with the last decade focused on innovation and deployment of emerging technologies. Since joining Oneweb, he has supported broadband deployments in remote areas of Alaska, providing services to many Alaska Native villages, schools, and healthcare facilities, and supporting Oneweb's mission of connecting the unconnected. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Again, I'd like to start off by thanking everyone for the invite to be here. It's been a great last couple of days and a huge learning experience for me personally. It's been great from a Oneweb perspective, being able to kind of have discussions, right? Get a better understanding as far as what the needs are for you guys, what you're experiencing out there. And so the fundamentals of communication, I think, is exactly what we've been able to experience with you guys over the last couple of days. So again, thank you for that. And thank you as well for the introduction. Again, based in Anchorage, Alaska, specifically on the Dena'ina Athabascan lands. All right. What we'll dive into this morning and kind of what I had planned, zero sales pitch, right? I wanted to give a quick overview as far as what the Oneweb kind of network architecture is, what we do, and kind of how we do it. And then the last half of what I wanted to talk about is actually real world, what we've been doing in Alaska, what we've been doing in some of these remote communities and the indigenous communities we've been working with, and those services we're able to provide out there. All right? So we will dive into what we do, right? Kind of what is Oneweb and what is LEO or low Earth orbit. So a lot of people are familiar with GEO, that geostationary connectivity, and where does LEO or low Earth orbit fit into that? And what we're seeing here at the top is kind of that direct comparison, right? GEO as it stands today, really far out, provides great coverage, but because of that distance, we're all impacted by latency. All right. Where LEO sits, and specifically Oneweb, all of our satellites are on an average of about 1,200 kilometers up, right? So dramatically closer, about 30 times closer than what we typically see with a GEO, right? So that is a direct impact on latency. True broadband experience at this point. You're able to get the throughput speeds that you'd expect and are able to experience with a solid GEO connectivity, but with that low latency. Average what we're experiencing in Alaska and what we're seeing on our deployments is a true average of about 100 milliseconds round trip, right? So for example, what's happening in that network, and we can kind of see that from the architecture that's displayed there. You have a user terminal that's deployed on site. That's going up to the satellite 1,200 kilometers, back down from that satellite another 1,200 kilometers to our ground station, right? In that ground station, it goes through all of our networking equipment and then out to the point of presence, right? And then out to the internet from there, and then all the way back. So that is all happening in about 100 milliseconds, right? So it's pretty amazing what the technology is able to do and what that real world experience is like. And that's where when we talk about enabling broadband and having that true broadband experience, that latency is that key user experience, right? When we're looking at doing any type of interactive services, being able to do live video, things along those lines. Cool. So from our network design or our constellation design, right, and a full network build out, we're still in the process of launching satellites. We just did another satellite launch a few weeks ago with New Space India. We put up another 36 satellites. So at a full constellation build, which will hopefully be this time next year, we'll be at 100% constellation build. We'll have approximately 648 satellites. And those satellites are arranged in 12 orbital beams that kind of do north to south, so they go over the poles and kind of converge. As it stands today with those new satellites that we just launched a couple of weeks ago, we're at 464 satellites in orbit today, right? Providing active services for 50 degrees north latitude, okay? Let's see, yeah, so spectrum, right? We use Ka and Ku band spectrums for any of you that are familiar with kind of the satellite side of things. We use Ka for the communication from the satellite down to the ground stations, and then Ku from the satellite down to the user terminal. Okay. Let's see what else we've got on there. Yeah, again, 7 gigs per beam. We'll dive into another slide kind of coming up, and we talk about the architecture, and so you can visually see how we've designed and developed our network and how it's different from some of the competitors that are out there today and what that looks like and why we're able to kind of support some of these higher throughput speeds. Right? One of the cool things, and I had touched on it a little bit just a couple of seconds ago, about this full constellation build, right? We've got 648 satellites at that full constellation build. One of the keys that we've built into that from a resiliency perspective is in each one of those 12 planes, we have 5 spare satellites, right? So if we have a satellite that decides to die, right, or is defective, we have the ability to quickly deorbit that satellite, move that from the constellation, get rid of the space junk, and we have a replacement satellite that's already in orbit, right? We can essentially flip the switch, turn that on, and service is resuming. We don't have to wait to schedule a new launch, wait for the next batch of satellites to go up. We have replacements that are in orbit already. Okay? We'll go ahead and jump into, there we go. Let's see if this animation works. So this is a good representation of kind of the 3 pillars of our network architecture, right? We've got our gateways or our ground stations that exist. It's kind of scattered throughout the globe. We've got one in Talkeetna. There's a couple that are planned here in Canada as well. Those ground stations talk to the satellites as they're constantly in motion and flying overhead. Then the third piece of that is the user terminals, right? As I talked about earlier, that user terminal is connecting to that satellite as it's moving overhead. That satellite is connecting back down to that ground station and then out to the internet or out to any other connection that you've got configured for that service, right? Whether it be a private network connection, an internal MPLS connection, or a direct connection out to the internet. So this to me is the important differentiator from our competitors, and a difference between the geo services that exist. And this is kind of how our network works. So before this animation starts going, each satellite has got 16 separate beams that are on it. That user terminal is connected to that beam as that satellite is constantly moving overhead, right? You're connected to that beam, and you're on that for about 11 seconds before you hand off to the next beam on that satellite. And then you connect to a new satellite about every 3 minutes. So there's this constant motion that's happening. And there are a lot of benefits with that, right? Again, if you get a defective satellite, you've got hardware issues with a particular beam and there's no performance on it, at most you're dealing with an 11-second outage on a bad beam, or at worst, a 3-minute outage with that whole satellite, right? There's this constant flow and motion that's happening. And that's what we're going to see right here, right? So we're talking about the beams. You can kind of see how the beams transition over that static user terminal. And again, talking about resiliency, there's an overlap in the beams once we're at full constellation, right? So you do have the ability, and there's some logic in the network from a network planning perspective where the user terminal, if possible, has the ability to kind of hand off to another plane, right? So again, kind of the simple piece there. So that's the big thing from a high-level network that I wanted to cover on this. Again, the network build, the constellation that we've built with the polar orbits, that constant moving of the network really provides for that solid connectivity, that fast broadband experience, that resiliency and that redundancy that kind of everyone has been wanting from a satellite connection for quite some time. Right? So we're kind of able to deliver that. A good way to think about the architecture of our network is a reverse cell phone network. And everyone's like, satellite, cell phones, and there's a couple of reasons I like to use that analogy. Again, part of my history, I spent 20 years in the wireless world, right? Dealing with cell phones and mobile networks and all of that. But the reverse cell phone network works really well here because think of that user terminal as the cell phone that's in your pocket today, except for your cell phone is sitting there. And the cell site that you're connected to is what is actually moving overhead, right? So instead of you driving down the freeway and your phone handing off from cell site to cell site to cell site as you're driving down, the satellites or the cell sites are moving overhead, right? And your cell phone is handing off. And where this correlation works really well is we're actually using LTE technology to handle that connection, right? So it is a 3GPP standard, right? What makes that great is there's a lot of security naturally built into that standard. But where this helps as well is from future deployment and development. Because it is a standard, there has been a lot of development over the years with that standard, and we're able to bring that to market and see this constant development. You're seeing things in our network which are coming that will help increase bandwidth availability and just overall user experience by building upon that LTE kind of technology as it exists. Cool. The next thing I want to talk about is a little bit about Alaska and transition into what we're doing in Alaska and what the real world looks like for Oneweb and how we're able to impact things. So Alaska is real similar to you guys here in Canada. We always like to say we're your friendly neighbor to the north, right? Right. We've got a really unique situation when it comes to the actual communities that we're serving. More than 80% of the communities in Alaska are off the road system, right? So that means they can only be reached by plane or by boat, right? So we're talking truly remote. And that means that connectivity doesn't exist in a lot of these locations, right? So what Oneweb is bringing to the table is hugely important, not only from just a community access, but to services, right? We're talking about providing rural health care to the clinics that are in those communities, to the schools, to the homes. Right? So It's a little bit of what we're doing. We've got 76 active locations in Alaska where we're providing service. So we're not just this startup that's trying to do services and we're out pitching, trying to get customers, right? We are providing active services today. So one of these locations, and I've got a video to play, and we'll go ahead and get that started, is the indigenous community in Akiak, Alaska, right? So we'll go ahead and get this video playing for you guys now.
Connectivity is something you shouldn't think about. If you're connected, you're not thinking about it. You know that someone can reach you or you can reach someone. You can share information with someone. You can reach out to a loved one and just to say hi. That is what connectivity means.
It's just extremely important today to be able to have broadband. 20 years ago, telephones were the big focus, but today, if you don't have broadband, you can't communicate. Alaska is the only state that does not have the ability to connect everyone in the state to broadband today. And so with Oneweb, we have a partner that is helping us solve that to connect everyone across Alaska. The satellite fleet.
When we got the call from Akiak community to come in and bring broadband to their village, this system behind me is what we built. The fiber that connects to the Talkeetna, Alaska teleport, there are 29 ground stations there. Those ground stations communicate with the Oneweb satellites as they float over Alaska. Those satellites communicate with the two domes behind me, and it goes up to the top of the tower and then spreads out in the community. Every home has a panel on the outside of the home that goes into the home, connects to a modem and a router, and then it's spread throughout that home. As the users connect to Wi-Fi and actually connect to the internet, it goes back the exact same way, back and forth all day long, and they're connected to fast broadband.
I'm taking classes to get my bachelor's degree in administration in the early childhood field. With the internet, it's made it a lot easier. I can see my professors during class. I can collaborate with my classmates, and then it's all in real time.
I have this one friend that's using broadband Wi-Fi for his college courses right now.
Oneweb has helped in a lot of ways. It's more convenient for us, like ordering supplies and payments over the phone.
What I want to look on YouTube is how to take off the bearings on both these front tires. All we can do is just look on YouTube, search it up.
I did learn how to make some recipes from online. I use Google a lot. So Google is like, even in my workplace and at home, Google's like my assistant.
My oldest daughter actually just left for a summer camp, and we had our first FaceTime. I used Oneweb. I can text. I'm really grateful that we can see each other. She's going to be gone for 3 weeks. My baby's leaving, growing up. Hi, Jamie.
Broadband has really changed us around here. It's faster on our Zoom meetings, faster on everything that we do.
And our younger generation, because I'm not whiz on phone, internet and stuff. These little kids, they'll take your phone and fix it. Here, it's good. They're smarter than we are.
This project is important because rural Alaskans have really been cut out of the big picture when it comes to the internet. So what Pacific Dataport and Oneweb have done as a team is bring broadband to a village that wanted broadband in their community.
I'm excited with what Oneweb is bringing to Alaska. Not only the promise of connectivity in these remote locations, remote communities, or a remote work site. We are providing connectivity that simply wasn't available before.
Cool. That was my 5 minutes of fame right there, right? And specifically, I wore the exact same shirt today. And I was told I should clarify that I did wash it between the filming of this and today. But to me, what this really does is it highlights what Oneweb is delivering, right? A lot of people will come up and they'll talk about connectivity and all of that. Like I mentioned in the video, this is the reason I joined Oneweb, right? Because it's a passion of mine. We have members of our community, members of our society that don't have access to the basics, right? And with Oneweb and the other solutions that are out there, right? We're more than happy to drop the Starlink name, right? It doesn't scare us, right? It's all in what can we do as a society to provide connectivity and provide basic services to these members that are out in these remote communities, right? They live there for a reason because they're connected to the land. They love it. We need to come together to provide support for them through connectivity, right? And one of the things that, you know, I was asked to come here for was to kind of talk about what we've been doing, some of the lessons learned. Obviously, I'm not the prettiest face in the room. I'm not a great presenter, right? So they could have picked anyone else to do this and probably would have been better. But it's a great opportunity for us to get together, have conversations, to understand what we can do as teams coming together, right? To provide this connectivity, whether it be rural healthcare that I mentioned before, being able to have these rural clinics and the nurses and doctors that are working there, and you have a patient that comes in, and being able to do a consult with an actual specialist that is maybe out of state, or even in a different country, right? Right now, currently, the way that would exist in Alaska is that remote community would have to put that patient on a plane. A lot of these communities only have plane access 2 times a week. If they're in a bigger community, maybe 3 times a week. They've got to fly them out to the regional hub where they put them on a bigger plane and then fly them into Anchorage to the Alaska Native Medical Center, right? That's what that looks like. So we could be talking a week, or if there's bad weather, inclement weather, flights get canceled, it could be up to 2 weeks before this patient gets to see the specialist that they need to see. By bringing broadband out to these rural health clinics, by bringing connectivity to these communities, we're able to shorten that time frame. We're able to provide better care to those community members. One of the towns I went out and visited this summer had to go out and do some work on one of our installs, a little community called Kivalina. It's one of the last communities on the northern west coast of Alaska. Extremely remote. It's one of the many communities in Alaska that's been impacted by the climate change that we're all dealing with, right? The community is actually sinking. It's on a spit of land. It's maybe, again, pardon my American lack of conversion to metric, but it's about 100 yards wide, and it's a little over a mile long, right? And it's on a gravel spit that's approximately 70 miles long, right? Surrounded by water on all sides, and it's sinking. Right, the community is there. It's powered by diesel generators. There's no infrastructure outside of that. There's not really any running water. So when we go out as Oneweb, and this is something that we'll talk about in a logistics slide coming up, is we're going out to these communities. We can't be a burden on that community. So when we travel, right, I bring my bed with me, I bring my food with me, I bring my water with me. Right? That way we're not going out to these communities, spending 3 days, which may turn into 2 weeks if it's bad weather, right? We get socked in. We're not draining their resources, right? But the excitement that we see when we land there and we talk to the community members who are just so welcoming, right? Giving us rides from the gravel landing strip on the four-wheelers back to the comm shelter where we're doing the work. Just super welcoming. The kids that are so super excited, and they're like, we love talking to people who come into town and visit, right? They just don't see that outside interaction very much. And the first question out of their mouths, are you going to make internet faster for us, right? That excitement to see that from them is just awesome. All right, that's what we do this for. So some of the lessons learned that we were hoping to kind of share and have conversations with you guys about, and I'm sure you'll have similar experiences here in Canada. The first thing is always funding sources, right? Understanding where that funding is going to come from, making sure that we're securing and getting that piece worked out. The second piece is integration, right? Understanding what the ultimate goal that we're trying to do in this community, what we're trying to impact. Is this specifically for providing connectivity for the healthcare clinic in that community? Are we looking at a broadband solution for that community where we're providing connectivity for the whole community? Or is it something else, right? So understanding what we're trying to accomplish there. And then what does ongoing support looks like? I know in Alaska, we've run across this for decades and decades, right? Where someone comes in with this great new tool, this great new product, this great new service, drops it, it's amazing, and then they walk away, never to be heard from again. And inevitably, 6 months from now, something breaks. Who do you call to fix it, right? And a lot of these communities are just littered with that, right? There's all kinds of old antennas here and there because it didn't work or it worked for a short period of time. There's no way to maintain it. So understanding what that ongoing support structure looks like, right? And then understanding the integration for future support, right? We'll kind of dive into this in the next slide, but one of the key things that we recognize as Oneweb is we are a piece of a larger puzzle, right? We look at ourselves as an enablement platform, right? We're essentially providing an Ethernet port to that community, and we want to work with the community members and system integrators and larger developers like the Kyndryls of the world that presented yesterday, right? To come up with these solutions for that community, to be able to provide that ongoing support. And that's where having an understanding as far as what's coming in the future and how do we make sure that we're providing support for those future technologies that are coming out. And that kind of goes into this piece here. And specifically, the first point on here is fiber. And I wanted to make sure that we all talk about that because especially if we're talking about rural healthcare, fiber is really what we need to achieve, right? That is the only solution that exists today from a technology standpoint that is going to enable that true real-time connection that we need, right? Ultimately, I think of in the future being able to do remote surgeries in some of these communities. Things like that can truly only be achieved via fiber. But there's a lot of limitations on getting fiber out to the communities, right? You've got cost, you've got timelines. I know there's been a lot of successes. I was talking to Peter the other day and hearing about what he's done to get fiber out to their communities. But there's timelines involved, right? And we look at Oneweb as the ability to provide connectivity today, right? You can pick up the phone, we can work out the logistics, understanding of what you need, and you can have an active broadband solution in a community within 30 days, right? So long as we've got all the pieces of the puzzle that are in place, right? So it's something that can be done today while we're working on those more long-term future deployments of fiber, right? Getting us the connectivity that we need. Understanding what that means as well from an investment standpoint, we're investing in this connectivity today while we're waiting to get that future connectivity. But how do we ensure that this connectivity exists and is usable in the future? So again, we're not implementing something that is just to be thrown away in the future. Making sure that, we'll use the Oneweb connection as an example, but making sure that we've got a plan to use that connection again, right? Fiber gets cut all the time, right? We lose connectivity. There's a forest fire, right? Some of that fiber gets taken out. So ensuring you've got backup connectivity there, OneWeb can provide that once a community has that access. Right? The other thing you can do is segment traffic, right? So if there are certain security requirements, I know we've talked a lot and we've had a lot of presenters about security and cybersecurity, being able to physically separate network traffic, right? You now have the ability to do that. So thinking long-term about what you're deploying, how it's going to be deployed, and how you can reuse this technology in the future as different and more ideal technologies are deployed, right? And then the big thing, which is what I've spent a lot of time with in Alaska in these communities, is how do we integrate into the existing technologies that may exist, right? Rather than going out and trying to, reinvent the wheel with a whole new community broadband solution, what does it look like from a deployment? In the video we talked about Akiak, and they set up an actual new community wireless infrastructure, right? Delivering connectivity to each home. In Kivalina that I mentioned that I traveled to, in that particular solution, we worked with the local telco, and they had existing copper infrastructure where they were delivering, and I'm going to use air quotes here, DSL services. DSL are actually a couple of hundred K per second per household is what they were experiencing there. Completely unusable for any type of internet access. But we were able to go through and work with that local telco to essentially plug the OneWeb Ethernet into that existing infrastructure. So now every home is getting 5 to 10 megs per second versus 300K per second, which is what they were getting before. And again, using that existing infrastructure, not having to invest in brand new infrastructure to get it out. So you're speeding the time to deployment, and you're saving cost and reusing that infrastructure that exists today. Cool? So those are some of the big things I wanted to cover, and I think we're okay for time. So I guess we can open it up to just some basic questions here, and actually what I'll do is if anyone has questions, I'll direct them to Paul, because he's the smart guy in the room. So we've got a couple of people from OneWeb. We've got Michael here, and then Paul is my counterpart, and Paul is actually based here in Canada. He actually lives over on Vancouver Island as well. So you guys do have local teams. Michael, where are you located? Again, my Canadian geography is not, you'll have to forgive the American. Cool. Yeah, so if there's questions, ask them now. Otherwise, you can grab us afterwards.
Wondering.
Yeah, so where we're at right now is, like I mentioned, we've got 464 satellites. We're providing, we break it up into CSIs, right? That's kind of a language that you'll hear a lot if you interact with OneWeb. So we're at CSI 1, which is kind of that customer service level 1, right? So we're providing service 50 degrees north latitude. We're going to roll out as we get these final stages of satellites turned on, and our plan is to have 100% global coverage with this last several launches of satellites that'll be coming up next year. So by this time next year, November, December timeframe of 2023, our plan is to have that 100% global coverage. So no matter where you are globally, whether you're in Antarctica or you're in South Africa or you're in the middle of Canada, right? You're able to get that OneWeb service.
From Klavik, Alaska to Atlin, British Columbia. My community is 150 people. Like a lot of the connectivity challenges that you explained. I measured the bandwidth in my band office, and they were getting 175 kilobits per second on the wireless. So there's been a lot of emphasis in Alaska, and I live in north of 60. I live in Whitehorse, Yukon. I've based my whole career in the north. We have one line of fiber that runs along the Alaska Highway that connects the entire Yukon. We don't have any redundancy in that network. Up until COVID hit, we were on tariffed connections, meaning we had overage charges, we didn't have unlimited Wi-Fi. The CRTC has put, a lot of money into infrastructure, and I'm just wondering, why hasn't OneWeb expanded yet into Yukon, NWT, and Nunavut?
Yeah, I'll hand that off to the local guy.
Thank you. That's an excellent question, and the short answer is that we have, but the way that OneWeb operates globally is that we work through what we call distribution partners, because we're effectively a wholesale global company. It's not possible for us to deliver services to all of the multiple different types of end users on a global perspective. So we select partners that are able to deliver and support our service. And so, I'm sorry I don't know your name, I only arrived this morning, but first of all I'd like to say I think you're incredibly lucky to live in Atlin. I've been there myself, and it is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been anywhere on the world. Having said that, I recognize the need for extra connectivity there. Our partner that we work with that provides services across Nunavut, Northwest Territories, and the Yukon is, and I'm sure this is going to bring a frown to your face, Northwestel, where we are working with them actively at the moment to deploy OneWeb services to 10 communities in the Yukon, Northwest Territories. I think, if I remember correctly, it's 8 across the Northwest Territories, 1 in the Yukon, and 1 in northern BC, Fort Ware, actually. I cannot obviously comment on what their plans may or may not be for Atlin specifically, but I think this is something that if you were willing to raise with them and suggest that you are talking directly to OneWeb, maybe we could initiate some sort of three-way conversation so that at least the community of Atlin has some understanding of what Northwestel's plans are to augment the existing services that they provide there. And I do not by any means underestimate the challenge of doing that with Northwestel. I have lived in the north myself. I was in Whitehorse for 2.5 years, and so I understand those challenges, but we are quite willing to help broker a conversation if that will support the needs of the Atlin community. I hope that answers the question, and happy to leave you my contact details before I go.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to let everyone know that Telus isn't going to make it to present today. So I don't mean to hog the mic. Please, let's have an open discussion about low Earth orbit and our communities. Northwestel actually invited me to be their keynote speaker for International Women's Day last year. And I know the president of Northwestel, Curtis Shaw, and so Curtis Shaw doesn't have any plans for Atlin because the ILEC in my region is actually Telus. And I'm working on the broadband connectivity study for my First Nation right now. And so I talked to Northwestel and I talked to Curtis Shaw, and honestly, my First Nation, I don't know what happened, right? It seems like there are remote connectivity issues, but Indigenous communities get left even further behind. It looks like Curtis Shaw has plans to bring OneWeb to a community called Old Crow, but I don't see Atlin on their plans. And so I don't know how someone becomes a distribution partner, how big your budget in your organization needs to be. I don't know, there's other First Nations across Canada here who are ISPs and are looking for solutions for their community and would like to be distribution partners with Oneweb, because some of your competitors are direct to commercial, direct to the home. And so let's talk about some of the opportunities that they have in the United States as well. Just specifically around connectivity. So I found this really interesting that in the United States, there's an Indigenous lawyer who spoke to me, and her name is Dara Blackwater, and she said, our treaties are as long as the grass grows and the rivers flow, and spectrum is like rivers in the sky. And in the United States, First Nations have first access on that broadband, the 2.5 megahertz spectrum, and they can bid on it before the ISPs, so like before Verizon and AT&T or whoever. The broadband that runs over their tribal lands, they have first access to that broadband. They have an economic opportunity that we don't have here in Canada. It's something that I would like to see. And so as you're looking for distribution partners, like even in Aklavik, I'm wondering, ACAC, I've never been there, but you know, even there, like how did you build capacity with an Indigenous community? Like did you allow them to become a distribution partner? Like do you have Indigenous youth that you mentored like into low Earth orbit? Like what sort of community investments did you look at beyond providing internet? Like what kind of community capacity? We were talking yesterday about the importance of mentoring more young people in tech. And so I'm interested in sort of like the community social aspect of Oneweb as well. That was a lot, but I just want us to have a discussion, and I'm so grateful that you were here today. Like, let me say, like, I've been motivated for low Earth orbit for so long, particularly because I'm from Atlin, and we're ready to be the next Aklavik. So please, I don't know how long it's gonna take. Like, I just know my community is suffering. People from the band office, like, would take their laptops up to the free Wi-Fi spot, the free community Wi-Fi spot, to like download the map packages to do their jobs. And we had like a major, there's so much happening with climate change. Right on the Taku River, which feeds into Juneau, we're the traditional caretakers at the Taku River Tlingit First Nation of the Taku River, and there was a huge landslide that happened in our traditional territory. And how nice would it have been to have the technology to properly assess and manage and mitigate that climate change event that was affecting the salmon, right? Because it would be nice if you're from Alaska, it would be nice if you talked about the impacts of climate change and the impacts that it's had on the Yukon River. Something that we've known about in Canada for quite a while. So, thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I should just check first of all that we do have time to continue. Good. Okay. Great. So,
Paul's a talker.
No, I'm not. I'm not a talker, but I will try and tell you my perspective. And there's a lot of things there, and I've forgotten half of them already because I've got a terrible memory. So prompt me if I don't answer any particular aspect of that. So first thing is I didn't realize that Atlin actually fell under Telus. That was news to me, so I apologize for that mistake. We are also working with Telus to become a distribution partner. So there is hope in that regard, but seeing that the pace that... Is Telus here? No? Okay, so
we can talk bad about them. Just kidding.
So it's taking quite a long time because they are quite a slow-moving organization. That's one point. Second point is that we have multiple distribution partners in Canada. And typically, with some of those partners, it can be a long and tedious process because they're quite old, established organizations that move through their due process. We have others that are much more nimble. And although I mentioned Northwest Tel previously in relation to the Yukon Northwest Territories and mistakenly Atlin, we have other partners that are also working in those same areas. So I believe Kyndryl yesterday gave a presentation about their involvement, and I believe that presentation included, hopefully, I wasn't here, an illustration of the installation of the Oneweb services that they provide in Fort Ware in northern BC for the indigenous communities there. We also have other partners that are providing services to Northwestel's customers across the Northwestel operating area. So our partners do not generally have geographic boundaries in the same way that you will probably experience with the established telcos within Canada. So for example, although we're working with Northwestel, they do not have exclusive rights to provide our services across all of their operating area. Same with Telus, same with any partner that we work with. There may be some constraints over maritime services and what partners are able to operate in that area, but I don't think that's relevant to this discussion. There have been some discussions, I believe, with various indigenous community organizations, not so much I think on the western part of Canada, more perhaps on the eastern part, in terms of becoming a distribution partner, either directly or through agencies. But I will be quite honest, becoming a distribution partner for Oneweb is not as simple perhaps as it could be. It is quite a lengthy, laborious process involving contracts, no commitments, but just legal contracts to make sure that everyone understands everything. And it can take a while. But what we look for typically in our distribution partners is the ability to deliver and support the type of services and deal with the type of issues that Martin just presented so well in terms of what's been done in Alaska. Providing the service, delivering the user terminals, installing them is one part of the overall requirement, but it's that ongoing support. When that traffic is delivered from that remote community, it goes up to the satellites, down to the ground earth stations, and then is delivered from our network to our partners' network in one of two locations in Canada. One is in Toronto and one is in Calgary at an interconnect site, one of these typical data centers where traffic can be handed off either to the internet or through enterprise private networks or whatever that requirement might be. So there is a significant onus on our partners being able to fulfill their part of the bargain in supporting that end-to-end connectivity from the community through to the internet, the wider world, wherever it may be being delivered. And we need to make sure that our partners are capable of supporting that end-to-end service. Our component is, over the Oneweb network, is a significant part of that, but it's not the end-to-end service. We, Oneweb, are not an ISP. We do not provide internet connectivity. We rely on our partners to do that and support the end-to-end service. So any organization that fulfills those basic requirements is welcome to open discussions with us to become a DP. The other thing I'll say in our defense is that we appear perhaps bigger than we are. We're still quite a small organization. In Canada, Michael, how long have you been here with the company?
I've been, I'm officially 13 days in with the organization. So hence Martin and Paul are doing most of the talking. But we would love to have further conversations with each and every one of these, and we can have those discussions about who the business partner or distribution partner is for each and given area or region, or who we would suggest or recommend, or even have a dialogue of if there is opportunities to become one. Absolutely, we'd like to have those conversations with you. So the other challenges when we talk about why is it taking so long to get our complete constellation up and services up and running. Part of that has been, we're a little behind where we thought we were. We're probably today, where we're at with our launch is probably where we thought we were going to be about a year ago. And, a lot of that has to do with, Russia, Ukraine, and where our rockets were coming from for our launch. So that put a big delay on a lot of our launches that we had planned. We had to go out and find other partners that we could work with through India and whatnot to get everything back on track and get our launches proceeding and stuff. So that's challenges that logistically that we've even had to work through for getting the services up and running. So some delays on where we thought we'd be, but I think we're kind of back on track, and we've kind of expedited a lot of our launches. And like Martin was mentioning, by this time next year, we're in a complete constellation. So.
Thanks, Michael. I've just done a mental finger count, and I think we have 6 employees now in Canada with OneWeb. The majority are based out east. We have one person, a service manager for looking after the services that have been deployed through our partners based in Calgary, and me based on Vancouver Island. So we are quite a small organization. And I've been with OneWeb since February 2021. And I forget how long ago that is. It seems like years because it's been such an exciting ride, but in fact it's only, 18 months. So we are still growing, and we really, as Martin has so eloquently explained, we really see the OneWeb service as a way of bridging that digital divide, as everyone likes to call it, but providing those services to those places that really need it. And let's be honest, being here in Vancouver in a place like this isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about what it's like up north in places like Atlin, Whitehorse, all the small, tiny, remote communities. I mean, people that haven't been up there don't really understand what it's like. They really don't. And OneWeb wants to help provide services to those communities. And we don't have all the answers, and I'm quite certain I haven't answered all the questions that you raised, but we want to try and help. And that's the best that I can say at the moment.
Again, I just really want to thank OneWeb for being here. Where are your competitors? They didn't show. Just saying. And you are so welcome in this environment. This is really about Indigenous health and connectivity, and I hope that OneWeb will be here again next year. I found your presentation so informative, and I've been so excited about low Earth orbit for so long. I was just this was probably the reason why I came. So just to summarize, Martin, what you had described, so I believe right now you have 464 satellites launched. Eventually you'll have 648 satellites. You talked about how there's spares and satellite backups, and how there's potentially 16 beams per satellite, 11 seconds on that beam to up to a 3-minute delay, so possibly like 11 seconds to 3-minute outage. But as the constellation gets further developed, we'll see that be eliminated. Also talking about your gateways and the ground applications that talk to OneWeb satellites and then to the end user stations. About the seamless satellite handoff, the reverse satellites, how you have 76 active sites in Alaska, the video about Aklak, Alaska, population 405. You have 6 employees in Canada. Lessons learned, looking at things like funding sources, integration planning, ongoing support, integration support for future communications deployments. Also about deployment logistics, how there are lengthy timelines for fiber or other terrestrial connectivity deployments. Low Earth orbit provides a true broadband experience, and how you're looking at simplified logistics and integration into existing community infrastructure. Could we speak, just because we have the time, we still have 15 minutes until lunch, and I'm wondering if we have any other questions in the room. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about the LTE 3G that you were describing, because as I'm talking about broadband connectivity, we're asking the question, particularly with the funding sources, which do you want first? Do you want cellular or do you want broadband, right? We might not be able to provide both services to communities, and so the fact that your technology is running on an LTE 3G standard, could we talk about that a little bit more? Because there's many communities that might have fiber, but they might not have cellular. And so just trying to conceptualize that in my mind about what that means potentially.
Yeah, we're good. One of the core applications when Oneweb was looking at, hey, what can we use our service for? Right, cellular backhaul was one of the big aspects of that. Right, again, thinking about rural communities, most of the network technologies today, when we're talking about deploying a wireless cell site out, they require fiber to be run out to those locations. Like I mentioned before, I spent 22 years in the wireless industry, specifically with Verizon Wireless, right? So I was there when we went from analog to digital, right? Back in the day, and text messaging was first introduced, right? Up through the deployment of 3G, 4G, and then 5G, right? And just using them as an example, they had a requirement on their entire 4G network that fiber be run to every single cell site, right? Which is great because that's an enablement requirement. People expect to get on their phones and surf the web, do video calling, et cetera. You need to be able to have that speed to support that application, right? But fiber doesn't exist as we talked about before, right? So being able to drop a Oneweb terminal at a remote location, connect that as the backhaul function into a cell site, and being able to provide those services. That is a core tenet of what we're doing, and we have been working with a lot of wireless carriers doing testing over the last year for that exact application. Right, so that's a big piece of it. Specifically talking about LTE and that kind of 3GPP standard that LTE is and how it's used in our network, people much smarter than myself, probably not quite as smart as Paul, but made that decision many years ago when they were planning the Oneweb network. And looking back on it from my perspective, I think it was an amazing decision because it is a standards-based platform, right? It's specifically designed to handle all of the movement that's happening within the Oneweb network. And it's kind of crazy to think about this 3D movement that's happening, right? We've got these 12 orbital planes with the 54 satellites, whatever it is in each plane that's constantly moving north to south or south to north, right? So there's that movement. Those planes at the same time are also rotating. Then you have the rotation of the Earth that's going on. So there is constant movement that's happening north to south, east to west. And then you've got the user terminals that exist today are stationary, right? But we have mobility that's coming out, right, for maritime and aviation applications. And that adds another layer of movement on top of it, right? So trying to go out and develop a technology and a standard that will support that movement will take decades, right? So the Oneweb engineers took a look and looked at that 4G standard. And like I talked about the reference of, hey, the cell phone in your pocket, you're on a call, you're on a video call, driving down the freeway, you're moving from sector to sector within that cell site, right? A correlation to that within Oneweb is moving from beam to beam. Every 11 seconds, you're changing a beam within that satellite you're connected to. Again, you're changing beams or sectors within that cell site. You connect to the next cell site, right, that's down the road. Totally transparent to you. You're on your video call. You have no idea. You don't care that you just changed cell sites, right? You just care that your call is still going, right? And that's what we've built in, and that's why we use that technology, because it's inherently built from the core as a standard to handle that type of movement, right? That constant movement. And to have that network transition happen in a transparent way to that end user, right? So that's kind of why we went with that standard, why we use that standard. And let's be honest, 4G as an LTE standard has been around for a long time, right? There are millions and millions and millions of active users on that in the wireless world. And so, like I mentioned during the presentation, there's been a lot of continual development, right, and enhancements that come with that. And so we are able, as OneWeb, to take advantage of those enhancements and those releases to that 3GPP standard, right? That just, again, enables future enhancements to our network without having to go out and recreate the wheel.
Probably not. I'm going to ask it anyway. So we had a discussion here the other day about kind of the space equation, as you were. Those of us that live in the north have seen a mass amount of more of the aurora borealis or the northern lights, and that's a solar mass ejection, right? So is there any concern as we put more satellites in low orbit or geosynchronous orbit of solar radiation affecting us? Because they're saying that the sun is coming into a ever-increasing ejections between now and 2025. Do we see any of these services causing disruptions or increased latency or anything along those lines as we continue to invest in LEO orbit stuff?
I'm glad you're getting that question, Paul.
Yeah. So the short answer is no.
We're not worried about it, or it's not going to happen?
No, I mean, in all honesty, I can sit here and say, yeah, we're not worried about it. But I think the reality is, who really knows?
Yeah.
These satellites have only been up there, I don't know, a couple of years, whatever it might be. The sun's activities are unknown. It might increase. There might be an effect in the future.
Yeah.
Am I worried? No. Because I think a bigger concern is the fact that the sun's going to die within 25 billion years or whatever it is, and what that might do to the world. And I'm saying that in a fun sense, but the reality is nobody really knows. Obviously, sunspots and in the VSAT traditional geostationary world are an issue. It's possible that they might prove to be an issue in the LEO world, but as Martin explained earlier, we've got lots of satellites up there. They're all moving. They're not exposed to the increased sun activity in the same way that geostationary satellites are. And if there is a problem with a satellite, we've got 5 spares within each individual plane that can be maneuvered into position to accommodate any failures due to whatever reason it might be, space.
Maybe important to talk about our Gen 2
deployments. Yeah, that's a good point. We're also working currently on our Generation 2 platform, and that will be a new generation of satellites, new capabilities, and obviously the pointy heads that invent all this stuff, they really do take into account the various factors that may affect satellite performance. And obviously the sunspot, sun activity is a really relatively big area of concern in the satellite world, so they will be looking into that. But
I figured people are smarter than me.
yeah. So that there's no definitive answer because, stuff happens, shit happens.
Yeah.
Anything can happen. Asteroids, If shit happens, I think we've got bigger problems to worry about than whether or not one individual satellite goes.
Yeah.
In my world, that's how I view it, but that's probably not the official company line. But
that's not our go-to-market logo.
No, but this is an open forum, an open discussion, and yeah. Moving swiftly on to the next question.
Does anyone else in the room have questions about low Earth orbit, specifically from OneWeb? I had a question. I was wondering about your packages, right? About your service offerings. I don't know if that's proprietary information to your distributors or, because I'm thinking about so what is the commercial service that you're offering and how much does it cost?
Yeah, so when So when we talk about pricing, right, that is something that is set by the distribution partner, right? We don't necessarily get into the pricing game. But what I can do is talk a little bit about the service plans and what that looks like, right? Oneweb, again, our whole network and our service is built differently than other LEO players that are out there that exist today, right? Like I mentioned before, we're not afraid of Starlink. Starlink provides a great service, right? And what they're providing is, like OneWeb, we're really changing the face of connectivity, right? And we are super supportive of any connection that can go out to these remote communities and provide them, connectivity, right? That's ultimately the goal there. Our look and how we built our network is completely different, right? Think of Starlink as a direct-to-consumer home internet provider, right? They compete with your DSL and your cable internet provider at home if you lived in an area that provided DSL or cable internet, right? That's the service that they sell, right? It's a highly contended service. You're fighting for a limited amount of capacity that's delivered by that satellite. You're fighting with your neighbors and anyone else who happens to be within that cell is the terminology that Starlink uses for that capacity, right? So again, great service, it's just targeted at that consumer. OneWeb, our target is more of that enterprise business grade solution, right? So we built our network without contention. We do very strict capacity management and planning. So when we have a customer that comes to us or a community that's looking for service, we do the planning around that. We take a look at what other terminals we have deployed in that area, what contracted information rates are assigned to that particular terminal, and we do not oversell that contracted information rate within that beam, right? We sell only what we have to offer, right? So when you're paying for a OneWeb service, you are getting a CIR service that's simply not offered, right? We don't do any kind of throttling or data caps, Starlink issued those, I think, last week. They announced that there would be implementation of throttling, et cetera. Again, we're providing an enterprise type service that's not something that is in our vocabulary at this time because of that network planning. The second piece, which is really important for a lot of these applications, whether we're talking about rural healthcare or any other type of enterprise grade services, we offer prioritization and segmentation of services, right? So we support at the network level EF and AF tagging through the network as well as best effort. So we've got customers who have corporate applications that are foundational applications, and so they do EF and AF tagging and identification of that traffic through our network. So that way there's a prioritization, and we respect that prioritization through the network, right? Those are the types of things that we do differently that a retail internet provider, it's just not what they do, right? It's not their line of business. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And so that's a lot of our plan differentiation and segmentation is we offer different packages based upon the speed that's needed, right? So that contracted information rate that's needed, and whether or not you need prioritized services, right? Do you need EF and AF services, or do you need just basic best effort type services? So hopefully that kind of answers the question without talking about pricing that I don't know.
Thank you so much for answering all of our questions today. One more time, does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, excellent. That brings us to 12 o'clock, and so it's lunchtime, everyone, and we are just about finished. After lunch at 1 o'clock, we will hear from Jeff and also Patrick, and we'll have a really excellent performance from Coastal Wolfpack. So please enjoy lunch, and I'll see you all at 1 o'clock, and then we'll be drawing for $200 gift cards and the last iPad. Thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. We have made it to the end of the conference. Attention. Thank you so much for the invitation to be at NIITA this year. I explained to everybody in 2019 I was still just behind my desk working in tech. It can often be quite isolating. I know many of us work in silos. A big thank you to all of the sponsors and the presenters that were here, and for the information, knowledge gathering, and the way that we were able to really network and get to meet different people from across Canada that work in the healthcare industry, and specifically within Indigenous communities and in health. Over the last 3 days, the ability to network with different manufacturers and companies within technology, and to learn what other people are considering and thinking about as we move forward into 2023. Without further ado, I did want to welcome Jeff Niles, who is the National eHealth Manager of Indigenous Services Canada, and also the Strategic Advisor for the National Indigenous Information Technology Alliance. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. They asked me to close this meeting, but I think it's really opening the meeting. This is an amazing opportunity of information sharing. Incredible. You guys are what I call magicians. You guys make things work. And having you guys here in one room, our approach will be to get this wall moved over, okay, for next year, okay, to expand it even more so. I want to thank Cherish. This is going to sound like an Academy Award. If I had Cherish at Trent University, I would be an A student, because you summarized all the information. It's incredible. An amazing job. Also, I want to thank, as I said, all the people here. Pam, Patrick, hand of applause. Okay, to you guys, amazing. For next year, I think we need to, as I mentioned, expand this even more so. And I look to everyone here to extend the word to your partners, friends, people who are all in the network as well. I gauged it, and I walked around and tried to introduce myself to everyone. And one person that I always gauge with is Shane. Shane will tell you exactly what he's feeling. And he said he learned a lot. He's always learning. And other people. And the passion in the room, I just had a chance to chat with Vincent. He's in the back there, passionate about his work, passionate to share. And that's what it's all about, is to share information, share content. And we're doing this really on the sides of our desk. This is not my full-time job. It's not your full-time job, Patrick and Pam and others. And I think once we expand, once we have that opportunity, once we grow, but you guys out there are the champions. You guys have to be our overall, I guess, ambassadors and share that knowledge, share what we're doing. So, and I also want to shout out to our industry partners. They came here, they left all egos at the door, and they came here to listen and learn. And I'm very thankful, and I want to applaud you guys for that. Really do. As I said, this is not a closing remark, this is a start. This is an opening, and it's an opportunity. So I'll end there, and I want to thank you. I also want to make sure you spend time with your family, especially on Friday, Remembrance Day, and take time to spend time. So I'll end there. Thank you very much. Safe travels, to folks, and we'll see you next year. And I'm scared to say where, because Pam is going to have my head, but it's whatever they choose. So I'll leave it at that. So please, again, I cannot emphasize, spread the word. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to say a few quick words to everybody and thank you all for making it. I was kind of stressed out at the beginning. I'm like, are they going to catch their flights, or are we going to, people are going to show up? So I'm happy to see this full room of all you wonderful people, and I wish you the safe travels on your journey home. I'd also like to say thank you to our industry presenters. Without Jeff's help, between the two of us, we manned that and we got everybody together. So miigwech to Jeff, miigwech to the industry presenters and the keynote speakers. Thank you to Jade and Darlene, who manned the registration table. To Keaton Knight for manning the conference laptop at the back. You made my life so much easier these past 3 days. To 47 Filmworks for all their amazing video production and the streaming services you provided, and to our wonderful banquet staff, Leo, Bobby, Sherilyn, Rosie, and Betty. I'd also like to thank our NIITA steering committee members, Debbie, Ryan, Charles, Roseanne, Sue, and Patrick for keeping me sane these past few weeks. It's been wild, so miigwech to everybody. So I want to get started and introduce you to our closing performers. Satsu Stelkaya means Coastal Wolfpack. The group consists of over 25 male and female members of a single family, from aged 6 months to over age 50. The variation in age and gender allows for more song, dance, and stories to be shared on stage and in their performances. The members of the group with pride represent the following coast communities: the Musqueam, Squamish, Sartlip, Nanaimo, and more. The breadth of membership, along with the multi-generational performers, give their audiences a belonging to this, the hereditary lands of the Coast Salish people. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Satsu Stelkaya. Haichka.
Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon. Is it on? Says it's on. Check. I'll just use my long voice. Good afternoon. It's an honor for me and my family to be here with you today. This is kind of awkward for us because we're used to being at the beginning of the conference. But it's again, it's an honor. My family, Coastal we based here in the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, but we represent different nations throughout the Coast Salish territory. Tsartla, Pinnacle, Nanaimo, to name a few other nations that we represent. And some of us, again, are from Musqueam, from Squamish. And that's why we come up with that name, Coastal Wolfpack. We all know how wonderful wolves travel in packs and their family and everything like that. And that song that we entered in with was our paddle song, Musqueam paddle song. And when we travel to go and visit our friends and relatives, or friends and relatives coming to visit us, that's one way that we communicate as we're approaching the beach, the shore of the territory that we're traveling to. So that was the Musqueam paddle song. We'll share with you our Women's Gathering song. And this song came to our family a few years ago by one of our villages, what is called Jericho Beach, Lorcano Beach area, that neighborhood. We used to all go there and harvest our plants and berries to make our medicines and our herbal teas. And our women used to have cedar bark baskets strapped to their back. And so we'll get into that song and dance. Hi, Krishna. not only to share a little bit of our culture and who we are as Coast Salish people, but we always, as Homo Comestible, people of the land, we always give thanks to everything that's alive. You know, whether it be the animals from the water, animals from the forest, animals that have the wings and fly, you know, and even plants and berries, you know, for all of those giving up their lives to feed our family, to nourish our body, heal our body. So we're always giving thanks to everything that's alive for helping and assisting us. And that's one of the honor songs, to honor those plants and berries and give thanks to the women to go out there and harvest those medicines. This next song and dance that we'll share with you is called Seven Sisters. And at one time, Musqueam had 7 sisters with us, and the elder sister passed away, unfortunate death, and the 6 remaining sisters couldn't stop crying. And our family, our elders, you know, told them, you just have a certain amount of time to mourn, but it was just too hard for them to let their sister go. So they ended up passing away to become ancestors with their sister, and they were reincarnated as old-growth cedar trees and placed in our village called Swikwai, what is called Lumberman's Arch in Stanley Park today. Placed in a circle like they were holding hands. And again, this song come to us, and this one was just to honor those 7 sisters, to be there for the family, be there for the community. Coast Salish people, we do a lot of our ceremonies in our longhouses, in our big houses, and before contact with our visitors, that would be our homes, you know, huge family living in one big longhouse. But today we use them for naming ceremonies, memorial ceremonies, to name a few potlatches, feasts that we do. And the ones that are wearing the paddle outfits, paddle regalia, when a host family asks, you know, invites the people, they ask a few individuals to cleanse the dance area of the negative shaman work. And everything that we use is considered a magnet, because there's always shamans out there to try and harm people. So the regalia that we use, we say it's considered a magnet, and it attracts that negative shaman work away from that dance area. And the shamans, you know, might even disguise their work as something hanging from the ceiling, coming from the ground, or just floating around in the air. And everything that we use is considered a magnet. And the men usually have deer hoofs strapped to their ankles and their shins. And we say it's considered a sledgehammer as they're dancing. dancing their dance so nothing will come up and harm the people. And the cedar bark regalia that a few of us have, that was our everyday clothing. The natural oils in the cedar bark made it waterproof and became our rain gear, you know. And we also have cedar hats, you know, and so yeah, that was, you know, just a little bit more of an introduction of who we are as Coast English people. And you really see how important the cedar tree is to us. Clothing, provides clothing, shelter, transportation, tools to go hunting and fishing. Yeah, so, you know, it's, you hardly waste, you know, the tree. And we even use the branches for ceremonial, spiritual cleansing at daybreak, you know. So continue with our performance, another honor song, and this one's called On the Hunt. And this one, again, you know, for the animals, thanking the animals for giving up their lives to feed us, to also provide tools, you know, with their bones and clothing, you know, with and instruments with their hide and everything like that, and their hoofs. So this one's called On the Hunt. Thanks, Kathryn. So before we exit with our another paddle song, I want to share with you and give you that thanks and that respect and honor for coming together and grasping on to you know the technology. Today, you know, we as Kwamok, we have to learn how to balance our cultural ceremonies, you know, protocols and everything like that. But also, we still have to go out there and provide, you know, for our families with the foreign currency that we know of, the Canadian dollar, you know. And it's you know, as being part of the community, we can't thank you enough for coming together. When we enter our longhouses, we're always taught and told, you know, right from our children, when we enter our longhouses, we have to have Natsamat Mastimo, we call it. One heart, one mind. And you guys coming together, being there for your community, being there for your family, you know, grasping on to what is there and then able to bring it back home to your family and community and share with them, you know, just how it has to be today, you know. And all of these songs, you know, these honor songs to honor you and give you that thanks for having that strong mind and strong heart and coming together as one, not so much one heart, one mind. So yeah, you know, we can't thank you enough as being part of the community for coming together and always and also having that open mind and open heart and being that sponge, we always say, being that sponge to absorb the teachings, the snawayith. We call that snawayith in our language. Grasping onto those teachings and being that sponge and absorbing all the teachings that you have seen, heard, and even felt these past few days that you were here, you know. So thank you for asking us to be here with you today to share a little bit of who we are and the territory that your symposium has taken place, the shared territories of Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and you know, even Coquitlam First Nation and Tawasin First Nation. You know, we were all considered one nation, and we used to have at least 30 villages throughout what is called the Greater Vancouver area today, as far as Port Moody, Coquitlam, Surrey, Delta, all the way west to what is called Horseshoe Bay and UBC today. You know, and we used all those different villages for different resources. Some of our people resided permanently in those villages, but some of them, majority of the people went and harvested what they needed and then went back to their home. So it's always an honor for us to be here, you know, to share a little bit of who we are as Coast Salish people and the shared territory. I really hope you enjoyed your time here in Vancouver. Safe travels back home to your family and loved ones. And that concludes our presentation. We'll be exiting with another paddle song. Thank you once again.